Hello and welcome to the Horrorble Podcast. Yes, you heard that correctly, the Horrorble Podcast. What we are fans of horror movies. In no way do we consider ourselves horror movie buffs or experts. So we're here as fans of horror to give you guys hopefully a refreshing and interesting new perspective on horror movies and the genre. Right? Am I right when I say that we aren't considering ourselves horror movie buffs or experts?
You're wrong.
Okay. Maybe I'm wrong. But that is the perspective we're giving you for this podcast, is a new and a very down-to-earth type perspective. So before we start on that, we'll delve into that in a little bit. We should just briefly introduce ourselves, our names, just our names. My name is Devin Arnold. We are based out of Louisville, Kentucky, and to my left I have...
Manton Frierson. I guess you don't really need the last name. I'm the only Manton around.
That works.
Basically.
It's a secret.
Oh, and I guess since I talked, I'm Dylan Holland, and damn it, I used my last name too.
Well, why not? He used his. I use mine too,
yeah.
but
Can we just go with the trend?
I
Here?
just
Devin
didn't.
started the trend.
Well,
So-
since this guy's talking,
Oh, my name is Brandon Rittman. I love horror movies, and I'm here to stay, guys.
All right. So anyway, let's delve deeper into that, the introduction of how we're trying to do this podcast. I think we all are somewhat on the same page of what we're going for here, but we've only discussed it briefly. But again, obviously nothing against horror movie experts and horror movie buffs, who I think we have plenty of friends who I would consider that. But I think that we just tend to watch movies similarly at a very face value level, to where it's a more honest and everyday type perspective. And that's our goal here, at least in my opinion, for this podcast. Manton, Dylan, what do you guys think?
I want to weigh in and add, first things first, we have no idea what we're doing.
I
Kind
second
of.
that.
So this is very much an amateur kind of production, but we're going to be giving it our all.
maybe like half.
Maybe half, maybe like
50%,
10%.
Yeah, something like that.
At best.
You know what? I'm
basically-
going to strive for greatness. I'm going to go 15%.
Ooh, big man.
Really, the technology is what's thrown us off mostly thus far. It's taken us about 3 hours just to...
So
really
if anybody knows how to work this stuff, email us or use a carrier pigeon or something.
I prefer carrier pigeon covered in blood.
I guess basically like what Devin is trying to say is, if we say something that's not completely accurate, don't hate us forever.
Yeah,
We may not exactly know what we're talking about. We don't have anything. We don't have any Wikipedia articles up. We're not looking up anything. So if we fuck something up, you know.
Yeah, but just to add on to that, I don't want to discredit ourselves too much. We have, between the four of us,
Seen a lot of movies.
tons and tons of horror movies. I mean, we've seen several, and we understand cinema to an extent. We just, I don't think we're at the caliber of what people consider like your quintessential
We're no
horror movie
Ebert.
buff. Yeah, so I
Maybe
think
Roper.
it'll be an interesting perspective when we will eventually review movies. Today, we're going to start off with an introductory podcast. So,
Is that what this is?
I guess so.
This is a long introduction.
Yeah. Well, does anybody else want to weigh in on what we're aiming for here?
Just to add some context, we do a 31 and 31, which is the third year that we've done it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where we
Beautiful.
attempt at least, and Devin is usually the only one to be successful, attempt to watch 31 horror movies, at least one per day of October until we reach Halloween, which is inevitably some classic that we play. But we try and find as many new things as possible, and the genre being what it is, we run across some real stinkers and some real, to use Devin's words, gems.
Thank you, Dylan.
Devin loves the word gems. I didn't notice that until you pointed that out on his reviews.
Oh, man.
Devin calls almost every movie a gem. I think probably 60% of the movies he watches,
Well, if
he's
they're
like,
good.
Hey,
oh,
some of
this
them are
was a
gems.
real
He's just an
gem.
optimist.
But yeah, to give you some perspective, I think I'm up to about 40 movies just this October alone. So
40 movies.
That's a lot.
hey, it's only been
my
in
God.
about 2 and 3 weeks. That's a lot of movies. So yes, we watch our movies. We do know what we're talking about to an extent. So from there, I would like just to introduce ourselves, kind of more in depth. If you guys,
Not
Well,
our last names and stuff.
well,
but
I mean, I don't
yeah.
think anybody has any
Somewhere to go
idea
to our mothers and
why
their
we're
maiden names.
interested in this podcast. Just like I was wanting to explain like where my rooted interest in horror movies came
Yeah,
from,
yeah.
and so I'll begin. You guys can just take note and do whatever I do.
Oh,
I
I'll
guess.
be taking
I'll do
notes.
whatever you do.
All right.
buddy.
I got my notebook out right here.
But basically, like Dylan said, 3 years ago is really when my interest culminated. So, like, to give you any reason to believe that we know our shit at all, about 3 years ago is when I first started really getting interest in doing the 31 and 31 format, which is really not a very creative or new thing, but I decided to pick that up. Before that, it really came through scary video games in high school, and that just naturally turned into movies eventually. So yeah, 3 years ago we did the 31 and 31. It was amazing. It was fun. It was trippy and kind of fucked my life up for a little bit, and I decided I want to try it again. So.
And then again.
And then again. So the year after we did it, and I eventually bought a projector, which kind of
and
changed
sold that
things
one
up.
and bought another one the next year.
I did do that.
We're on a budget
And
here, buddy.
It made for some fun outdoor experiences, but nothing like we've done this year, which was our third year now, where we were able to find a friend's house who lived pretty much out in the woods, and we found like a perfect little woodsy cubby to set up an outdoor theater, which was
Cubby.
yeah, nice little cubby.
What is
Or the
cubby?
last.
Did I say
the
something
cops,
wrong?
I believe.
I'm just reminded of my wonderful kindergarten memories and
That's basically what it is.
Watching
except in
horror
the woods.
movies in kindergarten. yeah.
getting scared by turkeys in the woods.
Right? So yeah, it was great. We had essentially just like the perfect outdoor theater setup. We had a generator running everything. We had an amazing makeshift projector screen. The projector was working great, and the
AKA
sound was
cloth.
awesome.
I got to commend
It was
you all for
cloth.
sewing that together. It was
Oh, it wasn't just cloth. It was like some weird.
Yeah, it was,
paint
it
or
was a good
insulation.
production.
It was good.
And it won't be the last time.
Oh yeah, so we're doing that again next week. Anyway, this is my third year of doing the 31 and 31 type thing. So I've seen over the past 3 years a ton of movies, and I know most of the movies I've seen. A lot of them we saw together at least, and that's kind of what my interest, or where my interest began. Manton, did you want to explain maybe?
I guess I probably got more into horror earlier on than Devin. Even as a kid, I was really sort of drawn to horror movies. I guess a lot of it was my mom never shied away from letting us watch some of the classics. I remember one of my earliest horror movies that I experienced was, I think it was one of the Hellraiser movies.
God,
I remember.
way to cut your teeth.
absolute jam.
Yeah.
Way to start.
Well, I don't. Well, it probably wasn't the first or the second one, so those are the good ones.
Okay. Yeah. They're the crap ones.
But I'll always remember there was a part, and I could be wrong about which movie this was, but there was a part where a woman was getting married, and I guess she was dreaming. It actually might have been Nightmare on Elm Street, since it was a dream. Anyway, long story short, I can remember vividly as a kid the scene where the woman gets her head cut off and just blood is spraying like a fountain, like comically like a fountain from her body, and like that sort of was ingrained on me, and just like the idea of being scared of that, and it was kind of exciting.
And 9-year-old you was just
Jeez, yeah.
loving it.
Probably, maybe honestly, probably younger than that. But anyways, there was a lot of that, and like we had like babysitters that didn't shy away from that stuff.
And we're also murdered when a stranger called. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of my introduction to that. And then, especially in high school, when I started getting into the internet, experiencing other people's opinions about horror movies, kind of diversifying my interest in horror movies.
Right.
And that's where most of us actually in this podcast met in high school.
I think I'm.
And not Dylan.
Yeah,
he's
I'm
just
the only-
some.
Well, I knew.
He's
Devin
just some
from-
guy. I don't know.
Yeah,
Dude.
I met Dylan in
Middle school.
Middle school, yeah.
Now I sound like a jerk because
No,
I was making a joke about Dylan being some guy, and now you're like, oh no,
Well, no,
he's
he's
a
not
good
just
guy.
some guy. He's
He's
some
the guy.
We're best friends.
He's the guy.
But yeah, I've been pretty deep into this thing along with Devin as well, and we have watched many horror movies together. The four of us, really.
Yeah.
But anyways, I guess I'll let someone else go on.
I guess if we're going around clockwise, yeah, I kind of shied away from horror movies honestly when I was young, kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum as
Me
Dan.
too, honestly.
I'm terrified of violence and like and scary stuff as a kid, but I loved ghost stories.
You picked a bad genre there, Dylan.
You're right. And but I remember there was like a breaking point where I was watching. I can't say which movie yet because it's on my list. But I was watching this movie in a hotel room when I was staying with a friend, and everybody everybody else was asleep, and I was just like, God, this is awesome, even though it was cut beyond belief for TV. But really kind of made me want to be scared, which I think is really the only reason that I watch horror movies. It's not that they're the best movies objectively, but they're the most fun.
Oh yeah,
They just get your blood pumping. Man.
They
That's
get
the
your
whole
blood
point,
pumping.
right?
that's something that I actually wanted to talk about at some point in the podcast. Is what is it that brings people to a movie theater, to a movie,
wanna
to
get
want to
scared.
be
Yeah.
scared? And why do I want? I mean, I love it, but I mean that's a different topic for another day.
I mean, if we're being real here, there's not a lot of scary movies to take you to the theater these days.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
really
yeah,
scraping
theaters
the
was
barrel
kind
there.
of a generous thing to say, but
the home theater.
Well, Blutz, if you want to weigh in.
No, and I just want to say, if we're talking so much about the 31 and 31, I just have to commend Devin for organizing it every
Thanks,
year.
buddy.
Because it's
Yeah.
really, it's like exposed me to so many movies and just made me appreciate the art
Yeah.
that much more. And it's just really given me a forum to really share my absolutely just worthless opinions on some of these movies. If I'm being
That's why we
honest.
keep them around.
that's why we keep Luce around. No,
What do you mean
question.
we've never debated or argued about a single movie ever?
Absolutely not. It's just such
Not
a,
once.
it's such a buttery, smooth process. Everybody agrees.
We've never
We're just
ended a movie
smacking each
where-
other's asses.
We've never ended a movie where people didn't just say, "Oh yeah, that was great. What did you think? Oh, I thought that was great too." We all just agree and get along.
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah.
But I think unlike these other guys, I don't think I had like an epiphany moment. But I remember ever since I was a kid, I loved roller coasters. Right, I just loved like the fear. You're like, oh my gosh,
Sure.
man, am I gonna fly out of this seat and just have a horrible bloody death, or am I gonna actually end? My heart's racing, you know. And then like there actually came a time, I think it was in like middle school or high school, where I just started, I don't know, they started making me sick, and so I was like, man, I need this thrill. And so I vividly remember one of the first movies that really just traumatized me as a kid was, obviously everybody has Sixth Sense, right? But for me, it was really Audition. My buddy Manton over here, he put on Audition, and I'm not kidding you, I couldn't
You
watch
cut
the
your
movie.
teeth on Audition?
I couldn't watch the movie. Well, it's not like my first, I wasn't popping cherries on that, but he put it on for me, and it was, because this is the horror vet over here. This guy started when he
Whoa.
was 5.
Oh, for sure.
All you gotta say is the bag.
Oh my
And
gosh,
then
man!
you know.
But
Yeah.
but no, like no joke. I couldn't finish the movie. It's just too scary. I had to revisit it like 5 years later.
One of the few movies to ever make me physically ill.
Oh, it's pretty good. It's pretty great. And I think it's like a real disservice when people don't watch it. But either way, ever since then, like, I think that just kind of spawned. I love scary games. I can't necessarily play them, but I like watching them. And it's funny because I get spooked so easy. When half the time when I'm watching a new movie, I'm like looking behind my fingers. I'm like scared shitless, but I just can't help it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's interesting. It made me realize. I guess I was on the spectrum of avoiding horror movies as a kid. I was terrified of them. And I cut my teeth on the original Halloween, which is hilariously poetic because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But it literally, it screwed my life up. I would say,
And you're still recovering.
yeah, for like 3 or 4 years. No joke. I still dream. I can say right now, I dream on a consistent basis about Michael Myers coming after me
Mike
to
Myers?
this day. No, not Mike Myers from the Love
Oh,
Guru.
okay. Yeah, just checking.
The other one.
Is that the movie we're gonna go with for Mike Myers?
Yeah.
No, his most famous role, the Love Guru.
You guys haven't seen that one?
But
No,
actually,
I
that's part of the
haven't.
fallout, though. Doing this, like Devin is here alone half the time watching
Yeah.
these movies because everyone else passed out or couldn't make
Yeah.
it, and he's just sitting here watching them in the dark. Just
I've definitely
It's
become
dumbest grin on his face.
desensitized since those days. But no joke, I avoided horror movie trailers when it was on
Yeah.
when they were on
Yeah.
TV. And it's funny when you brought up how Audition was the movie that you literally couldn't finish watching. Only one movie that did I like have the braveness to try to watch at that age. Like one of my first horror movies that I wanted to like actually watch, and it was the Mothman Prophecies.
Are you kidding me?
I remember
And-
you and
Oh,
your
no.
brother were terrified.
Oh my
of
gosh!
it.
And that's the only movie that I couldn't finish out of fear. It was the
Such a
Richard
stinking
Gere.
pile of shit, dude. It's
Richard
so bad.
Gere in the
nothing like
Mothman
Richard Gere to
Prophecies.
strike
So-
fear in your heart.
Well, we should
Strike
point
the
out
gear in
that
your hearts.
we should point out that we actually watched that as part of the marathon. I think
Oh.
last year or the year before,
No, that's funny because
and it was just It felt like it was 61 hours long. Like it was so.
It's not a good
No,
movie.
hilariously, we stopped watching that movie halfway through because it got too boring. So it was like came full circle.
We
So
really are desensitized.
it was ridiculous. So like the movie that I stopped watching out of pure fear, I rewatched for the marathon and couldn't finish because it was too boring. And that shows how much of a pussy I was, I guess, when I was a kid.
Just too spooked.
There's a few movies I literally couldn't finish in the marathon. I remember one I think was like The Grudge 3 or something. I mean, it was bad.
What was the one was called 2?
Oh, well, one was
We
called
didn't
2.
hang up on that one, but we should have.
Yeah, and
Pun
the
intended.
Ring 2. Also, I watched
Excellent segue there, Dylan.
I watched Ringer 2 once, and it was like I came out and the first words I said after that movie was, "This is literally the worst movie I've ever seen." And I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes, and I swear to God, I think it has like a 0% with a good amount of reviews. So I thought that was hilarious. Perfect.
Here's something that I'm wondering about you guys. Do you guys feel like you're kind of frustrated that you've become desensitized? Because I know for me,
A little.
Absolutely, yes.
like when I watch modern, like it's not just modern horror. If I watch any horror movie I haven't seen, I want to get scared. I want to get scared so bad, and there's so few movies that actually scare me
But
anymore.
that said, there are still like frontiers of horror that are still untouched, which
Yeah.
is why I keep sticking with the genre. And the exercise that we were doing, to figure out what our tops were, made me realize just how good this genre is. Even though there's so much shit we stumble across.
And you know
but
what?
There's so much diversity that really makes it interesting and like fun to explore all those avenues.
I don't know if you guys can kind of empathize with this, but since I was kind of like a late bloomer to the whole genre, and I kind of like had a very top heavy, great like load of movies to watch, kind of
From the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning, I was 100% spoiled by the genre. So yes, I was scared to death at first from all these movies. I was loving every movie I was introduced to. This was probably when I started my marathon, really, when I was just throwing boatloads of movies at me. So I was spoiled. And then the next year was like kind of a stinker year because I was so spoiled. We were starting to reach.
Year 2 was tough.
Year 2 was tough. But now, Dylan even pointed this out. He's like, I've noticed that your reviews have been overwhelmingly positive this year, and I don't think that's just because I definitely did put more research into these movies, but I think it was a weird graph of like being spoiled to seeing the great stuff to being spoiled and not liking anything to like kind of lowering my expectations.
That said, though, we
degree.
didn't do much research for the second year, and like the first year we started with a lot of classics, so we really did watch a lot of stinkers the second year, and I think this year we put more legwork into it, and that segues actually nicely into kind of what we intend to do with this podcast.
Sure.
Is that this is for people to discover horror so that they don't have to put the legwork in that we have.
Yeah, for sure. We put legwork. I mean, yeah, we put a lot of it. We not only watching the movies and reviewing them, but finding a movie to watch has been difficult because we've just seen so many in such a short amount of time. So hopefully we can get that done for like the everyday horror fans and the people wanting to see like a decent, legitimately scary movie, which is another topic that we'll probably talk about a lot, is like legitimately scary movies versus like
just fun,
classic,
good movies.
good horror movies.
That's what I love about the horror genre. It just has such a breadth. There's so many different avenues to attack. But like, kind of going back to the point we just had, that when it comes to like being spoiled, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm spoiled, but I would say it's more of you've seen so many movies, your expectations are just a little bit higher. But to kind of go off that point, one thing I would say though, that this obviously isn't unique to the horror genre, but I don't know, there's something about it that you don't really necessarily have to have any kind of budget to make a great movie. I think that there's certain fundamentals that you can kind of execute
That
on,
almost is unique
and it's
to
just
it.
going to be, you can still scare the hell out of people.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have $1 million budget.
An inverted William Shatner mask.
Yeah,
Exactly,
absolutely.
right? I mean, that's the kind of ingenuity that I think the horror genre just is so beautiful for.
That's what it was
because-
built on and popularized
Exactly,
with.
right.
It's just low budgets, cheap thrills.
Which
and-
is why we keep stumbling across good ones, despite
know.
it being
Right.
2014.
Another
That's
thing
what
that's
I love.
nice about the horror genre is that like a lot of the stinkers end up being a really good time anyway.
They're just
Yeah.
charming, you know.
Oh,
and
yeah.
fun. You just
There-
love
I
them for it.
can tell you like a few of the movies we've watched here that were absolutely despicably
just
bad.
garbage.
are some of the best memories that I've had. Like
yeah.
Can we name
American Ghost Story.
American Ghost Story?
yeah,
guys.
that's,
Let's just call you out, buddy. You're on blast.
Sorry. Look it up on
So
IMDb. Look at the
bad.
reviews. Oh, and Bloody Disgusting, which I really respect as a site.
Not anymore.
Yeah, they gave it like this tremendous review, and I'm
Oh.
so sorry for these independent guys because I feel your pain. I root for you guys, but this one was just an absolute
Just a
piece
shit
of
pile.
garbage.
Can we just point something out though? These reviews, we picked this movie up because it had good reviews, right? Pretty logical end. But if you actually do some digging, you'll find out that the reviews were actually done by people in the movie.
Yeah,
Right?
We did a little digging, and it turned out that like some
Family
of the
members.
We just couldn't
Some of
believe
the-
these scores, man.
some of the usernames on those reviews were suspiciously similar to the real names of the people.
Wasn't the
involved.
director in there? I feel like he was in there, fighting the
So
battle.
please, like, check it out. I'm not sure if you guys will
Get a
have-
good crowd. Get
Yeah,
a good crowd
have
who
to-
wants to laugh.
It's almost like looking back. Is it too so bad that it's good though, or was it just?
for me, it does
For-
actually.
I think it was.
It transcends.
and that doesn't happen a lot anymore.
that's
And like a lot of modern stuff, you don't see that.
I
So
feel like
bad
most
it's good.
bad movies are just so bad they're just bad. And this,
Lately,
like,
That sounds like a really shitty point, but it's actually really true.
yeah, because
they're so bad they're bad.
I feel like if we rewatched American Ghost Story, it would just be miserable and not
Oh, for
funny.
sure.
So I don't even know if I want to recommend this
No.
to the audience as a
It's-
funny thing to watch. It was really just horrible.
we
It's a
just got
one-time
lucky.
affair.
We got lucky that we had a good crowd.
yeah, we had a good crowd.
We were ready for that bad boy.
It was
Oof.
a stinker.
Did we didn't tell me we didn't kick off the marathon with that bad boy, did
I
we?
don't think
we
so.
didn't, but it was
think, but it was
very,
early.
It was
early.
very early.
And that was year 2. That was one of the other shit piles that we watched that year.
Yeah,
Sad
it was
thing was
that was
one of our
it's the year of
jams.
stinkers.
That was one of the best. Actually.
We got suckered into watching a lot of those, though. Like we have some friends that kind of talked us into watching
Yeah.
some
It
stinkers
Really helped us
too.
pick our friends
Oh,
on who we
man.
can trust in the
Are you
horror
kidding?
genre.
Yeah, I'm so leery of any recommendation people give me. They're like, "Have you seen like the most ridiculous B movie titles, like stinky, like hobo meat or something?" It's like
Hobo
just
meat.
like 3 ridiculous
Great,
words
actually.
put
Watch it.
together.
That is 60%
Like
on Rotten
the
Tomatoes.
creep of the butt farts are just like the most like.
Hang on, did everybody catch that? Creep of the butt.
I'm telling you,
Let's just take a moment.
that is what people do. They recommend the most ridiculous sounding B movie names, and I'm not a big fan of B movies, to be honest. And
Well,
I'm
I'm
very
gonna
leery.
convert you, buddy.
we'll get into
there.
that because then I'm
Yeah,
on the other side
I know
of the
that's
spectrum.
Manton's cup of tea.
Yeah.
I
Oh
like
yeah,
them too.
we differ. Well,
We differ. You can
Oh.
say that.
Well, that's a pretty good segue if we want to start our.
I
what?
agree.
First,
Well, let's
I do have something that I want to do before we go into what we're going to do after this. Eventually, is our top 5. We're going to go through our top 5 of favorite horror movies from each person, which will be interesting considering our perspective. For me specifically, I'm probably more on the end of like appreciating just flat out thrills and scares versus story and acting. So mine will be interesting for sure. But before that, I want to just kind of briefly discuss what we think makes a movie a horror movie. Just what versus like the very similar ones like thriller, sci-fi.
Well, is it that, or is it what we personally look?
what
for?
we personally look for. What you would say, like if you watched a movie, what would the reason that you would say that is
Sure.
a horror movie or that is not a horror movie?
So we're trying to figure out how we personally classify.
how you
something as a
personally
horror.
classify it. So for me to start off, mine's a very simple answer. It's to be a horror movie, it's either has to be scary or it has to have been intended to be scary. Because obviously there's plenty of horror movies out there that just miss the mark completely, that aren't scary, but you know the director was trying to make a scary movie, a horror movie.
So you
I'd still
wouldn't
call it a
classify
horror movie. It's just a terrible, terrible
Okay.
horror movie,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was gonna ask.
Or it's got to be genuinely actually scary. That's what I think. I think you literally can't make a movie without the intention of it being scary and call it a horror movie. And if we could discuss that, I don't know if anyone can think of an example of something like that, but that's what I think. I think if a guy sets out to make a movie without the intention of it being scary, there's no way you could call it a horror movie, right?
I mean, I could give examples, but I'm going to save those gems.
All right.
I'm going to save those gems for
Shout
when we
out
actually get into the
for the
list.
word gyms.
the Gemcast.
All right, man. I mean,
I agree, but at the same time, I think that it also comes down to like your perspective of scary and horror, because like you
Yeah.
can look at a lot of movies that aren't necessarily scary per se, but they give you that feeling, or they can be gross. Like take man, I hate to like mention movies that could potentially be on my list later, but if you take something like that, say David Cronenberg does,
Yeah,
where he does
David Lynch.
gross.
Baby.
then like body horror, things
Yeah.
that are gross
Yeah.
and they make you like cringe. That I think is horror too.
oh, definitely. But I
and-
would think that was intended to scare and freak out the audience
Well,
when it was made.
And I hate to
Yeah.
jump to mine too, but like with me, it's a level of discomfort.
Sure.
Right.
So like I look for movies that make me uneasy, that make me feel kind of off, which makes it interesting. But I agree that I still also want those like full on scares. It's just that if it doesn't have that, if it's the subtle creep, that's kind of what I like too.
Sure.
I mean, to your point though, Dylan, like that unease can be scary, right?
Yeah,
And I think that one thing like you have to think about when you're thinking of the horror genre is kind of pulling yourself away from your own like personal biases and realize that other people get scared by different things.
Yeah.
Like what scares me is going to be very different than what scares my mom, right? So to some people, it's just full-on gore. Like they see Hostel, they see all that blood, and it makes them feel so uncomfortable. Right. Well, it doesn't like scare me. It's entertaining, and I would consider horror-esque.
Sure.
But like to different people, it could be disgusting, like man said, body, or something filthy, and just the effects just really creep you out. There's no outright scares, but it still could be scary, I think.
Yeah.
But do you guys have like and a lot of people won't have this, but like a definitive argument for what a horror movie has to have, or is it just kind of like you feel
it when you
through
see
it? Yeah, you know it when you see it.
I mean, I have like my own spectrum, I guess. Like obviously, I'm not going to say Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is scary or Star Wars is scary, but I think that if something could be considered uneasy and it's clearly what they're going for, like that's the fulcrum of their movie.
Yeah.
I would say that's a scary movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think that sometimes directors set out to make a movie that's not supposed to be a horror movie and it inherently turns into one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but
have you seen? It's not a good movie, but Beyond the Black Rainbow.
No.
It's just really trippy, really visually interesting. There's no real plot, but it's so unnerving that it becomes kind of a horror movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can I just do one shout out to my boy, man? When we were watching Drive in theaters, he
Oh,
brought this
God,
up.
yes.
And I don't want to steal his point, but I thought it was really good that the second half of the movie is kind of almost a horror movie in the
I can see it,
perspective
like a
of
revenge
the
flick, right?
antagonist.
Yes.
Well, it's like a reverse horror movie.
It's so
It's a
like
reverse
unnerving.
slasher.
Well, which
dark.
would be like
you are behind the
like a
slasher.
revenge flick, like
Yeah.
the girl revenge flicks
Exactly.
where they
It's
turn
just-
into the killers.
Well,
And
like things like I Spit on Your Grave
Sure,
get
absolutely.
lumped in there,
Perfect
but
example.
they're not really horror movies.
they're revenge flicks. is
Revenge
what
flicks, yeah.
But
Yeah,
that can
it's-
be considered a subgenre. We just watched a Korean one recently that was brutal and dark and hard to watch. But again, like, is it a horror movie? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
All right, well, I think we all have a baseline.
Yeah.
Like,
Want
I
to get
think-
into this list?
yeah,
I'm itching.
we're gonna do this starting from the bottom. We're gonna do each
from the
our
bottom.
top
Now
5.
we're here.
We'll-
I knew that.
Thank you.
we'll
I'm so
discuss.
glad.
We'll discuss them one by one. And man, this is so tough. I've never been good with putting numbers to movies, whether it's like a list or like a rating out of 10. So there's like, I can think of very definitively of 20 movies that I love to death. That would be my top 20 probably, but I can't rate them very easily. But that being said, my top 10s and 5s changed on a monthly or yearly basis, whatever. But thankfully last year I decided to sit down and finally make a numbered top 10 list, so I had that kind of to refer to.
So, well, just to be clear, are we going to do a thing where we're going to say in order? Like, what is the order of this list? Are we
Order
going
is
from
absolutely important. Yes.
number 1 is the best. And
Yes,
we'll do
number 1 is the
ours?
best.
Okay.
We're doing that for sure.
Okay.
It's hard.
Just to make it difficult on ourselves. I don't know. Why not?
So I like it.
But oh man, again, so many honorable mentions, especially like one thing that's funny about this list thing we're doing, and again to kind of loop back to this different perspective thing. One thing that's great, I think, we don't know each other's list for sure, but am I right to assume that nobody has like The Exorcist on their top 5 list?
Nope.
I can proudly say I don't.
Proudly say.
I've
Now,
got
now,
issues
don't
with
get
that
me
movie.
wrong. That movie's great, and it is scary, but that's why I like this format we're doing. It's unorthodox. We kind of see things at face value, and I think that there are certainly, most definitely, 5 better movies than The Exorcist.
yeah.
And it's just funny to see on the 99 list out of 100, The Exorcist is going to be on that top.
Usually number 1.
Usually
I,
number
mean,
1.
I think that's fair out of 100,
But
right?
well, I'm saying,
No, he's saying out of 100 lists.
So I'm saying
Yes.
out of 100 lists,
Oh,
which
yeah,
I've probably
yeah,
looked. I honestly might have looked at 100 lists in the past few years, and it's honestly
It's the go-to definitive best horror movie.
yes, and it's a weird group thing type thing where
It's
people are just like,
strange,
oh
yeah.
yeah, sure. Now that I think about it, it is the best movie ever made.
To me,
and-
it's just like the Beatles, man. Like, you ask what the best band of all time is, they're gonna
Yeah.
someone's gonna tell you the Beatles.
And there's nothing, nothing wrong with that. But it is that thing where people just get it ingrained in their minds that it is the best movie. And I think it's unfair. I don't think I've seen The Exorcist. I've seen it a few times. And to be fair, my favorite time period of movies is from about 1973 to 1984.
Oh, that's a sweet
very,
spot.
very accurate.
Yeah, sweet
very
spot.
Specific.
So it's nothing against the datedness or anything. It's just there are better movies. And if we're doing my top 5, which I will do now, mine is definitely my favorites. My favorites, not what I'm saying are the 5 best. They're my favorites because I have a very.
I think that's
unique
the
list.
case with all of ours.
Yes, that's the case with all of ours, and we each have different criteria. And just to clue you in, to be simple, my biggest criteria is scariness. Like, it's got to have some scariness in it for the most part. Those are the best movies that I can think of that I've enjoyed the most, are the ones that legitimately affect me, terrify me, scare me. And my top 5 is kind of a half and half on that. So, without further delay, my number 5 actually is a great marriage of both those things, of both like classicness, film, story, acting, whatever, and pure scares. And you know what? I've been misled my entire life on this movie because I thought I was going to go into this movie watching it, having a good old laugh, and watching it by myself at night, which I did, because I've just been misled that this movie is just a joke. If anybody have any idea what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know exactly
I'm
what you're talking
guessing
about.
Evil Dead.
Are you 1981? Yeah, The Evil Dead.
Yeah.
The Evil Dead.
The first one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The 1981, right? Is that right? The Evil Dead is legitimately one of the scariest movies I've ever watched.
It's
and
great.
Maybe the atmosphere that I watched it in was helping, that I was alone. I think it was legitimately storming outside.
It was alone, sad.
Alone and sad. It was legitimately scary. And for some reason, I must have been kind of muddling all of the movies together when I assumed it was going to be a joke or a funny comedy horror.
The second one is.
The second one apparently is a remake.
And the third, too.
I feel like that was
Army of
kind more
Darkness.
famous.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I watched that movie, it was not super unlike the remake, which I also love, 2013.
Still haven't seen it.
But it's great.
It's all right.
But it was just legitimately terrifying from beginning to end. It didn't take time to just step on that gas and just start going. It was, I would say, within 20 minutes, the sound cues and the sound design and whatever was going on was already getting me just in that zone of terror.
It's a great movie. Right? I can say it's not on my list, but it wasn't in my honorable mentions because I always forget that I've watched it.
Right.
Which is weird
It's a damn shame.
because
I mean, that's
I've
the
watched
way.
it a couple of times.
Wait,
but
we need honorable mentions? That's new
I
stuff.
have
you want.
no. It's my honorable mentions are essentially
Yeah.
everything that I couldn't narrow down.
Sure.
Let's just focus on our 5 here.
But it's up there. My issues with it are that it's sort of the same thing that you like so much about it. I feel that it's poorly paced.
Oh, so, like, can you give me an example?
It feels. God, I know this is going to bring up an argument we've had previously. It feels like a first movie. It is,
Huh.
and it feels. I like that amateurishness, but I like the second one better simply because it perfects a lot of.
I think me
the
and
first
Mitten
one.
actually talked about the amateurness.
Makes it
actually
more
kind of
scary.
working in its
It makes it more
favor.
scary.
Yeah,
It does.
They just kind of went with it, and they were like, you know what,
Yeah.
let's just wing it, let's have fun. Kind of like the amateurness of this amazing podcast we're working
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
This is the Evil Dead
So
of
good.
podcasts.
5 out of 5 right here,
Basically,
guys.
this is the masterpiece. And
Sure. And then next year we'll do a complete joke one that will be more popular.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to be the
Yeah,
star.
yeah,
of that show.
exactly. Yeah, it'll
we'll
be
we'll
complete joke.
remake this exact podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll
Shot
get,
for shot.
more attractive, better sounding people to read it.
We'll have a fart track in the background or something. I don't know.
Gosh, you're talking my
Anyways.
dream right now. I don't know. Like, I feel like, I want to bring my guns to bear on Evil Dead, but at the same time, I don't know if I have the same scholarly
Fuck
opinion on this one. Like,
No, that's what we're not doing that.
the reason I like Evil Dead, and maybe I need to go back and review it and maybe kind of rethink my opinion of its pacing, but I thought it was really interesting from start to finish, right? And I think that there's enough mixture in there, which is funny because that movie is quite silly, which is kind of goes a little bit against Devin, but at the same time it's horrifying. And I think that the silliness pulls your guard down and
Yep.
your perception
Yeah,
of it
yeah.
before you go into it. You're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, man, I'm going to have some popcorn, I'm going to be cheesing it up, it's going to be no big deal.
Yeah, I
And then it
experienced
just
that.
scares the living hell out of
Yeah.
you. And the atmosphere in the movie is just great right from the beginning, which is why I want to know a little bit more about why Dylan here.
I don't dislike it. I guess I'm essentially kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit.
Sure.
There. It's
sure.
the reason that I didn't put it in my top 5.
but I
Yeah.
want to get educated. I want to.
When I watched it, I didn't know if I didn't think I would ever put it in one of my top movies lists, but the more it kind of grew on me, and then I rewatched it a week later just to kind of like certify, okay, I really do love this movie. It eventually got there. And one of the things I love about horror movies, of course, the scariness, but also the relentlessness, where things just keep coming and it doesn't slow down. And you're going to see another movie on my list that's like the epitome of that. It's just, there's no lulls. It doesn't start off slow. It doesn't end slow. It's just constant beginning to end.
I did immediately think you were saying lulls.
I did too.
I was
That's lol.
Well, I think
lulls.
actually, now that the more that I think about it, the reason that I have issue with it is completely my own fault. But I, like when I was younger, watched the second one first.
Oh, that can.
So it colored me going into the first one, and the first one felt more amateurish because it is. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people probably there's probably a lot of people that watched the second one first, and I mean that was almost. If I think I'm correct, I think that was his intention. Is that like he was like nobody saw the first one. We're going to essentially remake the second.
Let's do it
for the
sequel and please the crowd.
And to clarify, we should have said this. We're trying to do this in a no spoiler kind of way. Even though a lot of these will be classics, I'm sure a lot of people still haven't seen.
There's going to be times where we have to step that line a little bit.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Well, we can let them
straddle the line.
Yeah.
But I mean,
we need a sound effect.
So we're not trying to.
Spoiler alert.
We're not going to refer to specific scenes as much, but I just remember just from the get-go, as soon as they got to that cabin, it was just relentless, and that's what I love. It keeps you on your toes.
Cool, man.
All right, so in my list will be a little different. For one thing, I've been setting up all this stuff, and I didn't have time to really think about it, but two, I kind of wanted to do what are my favorite 5 right now, and like Devin said, my favorite 5 kind of switch around quite a bit
for sure.
But I'm going to start off with a movie that sort of impacted me more recently. The Conjuring. I saw that in theaters
I wrestled
twice.
With
that. Yeah. Probably one of the few modern movies to actually legitimately scare me. But on top of that, the movie is just exciting. It's and it does something that a lot of modern horror movies don't really bother to do, which is have sort of like a spectacle to it.
Yeah,
the movie
it's an event.
It sort of ramps up. It almost reminds me of like a like watching an adventure movie where the stakes are constantly raising. There's a lot going on. It has that element to it. It's a lot of fun. It's scary and just a fun movie to watch.
And there's definitive acts to it too, where where it ramps up. I love that one.
Yeah, you guys know James Wan is my boy, and that I guess people can safely say is kind of his masterpiece. Which is
directed
funny.
The
Oh yeah.
Well,
and James Wan, he did Saw, he did Insidious, he did Dead Silence. He's done a lot of what I would call kind of cheesy.
Sorry, did you say Insidious? Do you mean in shittiness?
Oh my god!
Insidious.
All right, we're not going to have that discussion.
But yeah, he does a lot of relentless horror where I think he legitimately sacrifices a little bit of acting quality and stuff for scares and thrills, and I appreciate that. But The Conjuring, I think people mostly agree, is the most easily the most well-rounded movie he's done. So that's why I think people appreciate it so much, including myself.
He's low.
Yeah, don't even get me on this dude, this director. I mean, like, I could milk his greatness for an hour.
Oh, he's my favorite.
And the one thing I want to bring up, like, kind of like a point to Devin is, like we said earlier, you focus on your strengths, right? If you can't break boundaries on storytelling or your cinematography, or whatever the case is, you just focus on what you know, man. And this guy knows how to craft just horrifying scenes that are just perfectly paced, get you in instantly, and just bring you through. Like, I think too many movies are just like, okay, well, the beginning, we're going to tell the story, and then we're going to ramp up, and there'll be scares at the end.
Right.
And, like, this guy's like, you know what? F that. I'm going to have a couple scares at the beginning, get you in there, set the story up for you, and you go from there.
I think what James Wan does, so you're right, what he does so well is that, like, each one of his movies has a scene that you definitively remember.
Oh, yeah.
And even if you don't like the movie, like, I don't like Insidious.
Shittiness.
I can't say it.
You did that to yourself, buddy.
I don't like Insidious overall, but there are a few scenes in it that are just great. and I will give them
Yeah.
all the credit.
Yeah,
in the
that one's
world.
definitely pieced together awkwardly, but that's
Terrible pacing.
I kind of have a view in movies where, like, if I can look back on the movie as a whole and not scene by scene and still be like, I really enjoyed that, I kind of forgive those things.
Yeah.
Because I love my scares. I love the engaging.
Love the scares.
Yo, shout out Dead Silence.
And
That's
that's
one of the best intros.
Well,
I've
we
ever
Great
actually
intro.
did. We I
Still haven't seen the movie.
revisited
He just showed me the intro.
Dead Silence
Oh my gosh! you need to
recently,
see
and
it.
it's got the poopiest reviews you'll ever see. But what it does is it's there to scare you, and it has that.
I'm a little offended by those reviews, man.
But they didn't get James Wan yet, I guess.
Yeah, that was pretty.
They're like, yeah, this guy's an amateur. He's
You know what
going
happened is
nowhere.
James Wan came out with Saw, and it was groundbreaking. And then he made after that he made an absolute stinker with Kevin Bacon. He tried to make like
How could that
an
happen?
action or thriller movie that got the worst reviews. So he just kind of had to like rebuild his name back up when he finally did it with The Conjuring.
At least
and-
he's coming back, man.
Well, no,
Yeah,
let me finish. The worst part is he did The Conjuring, which was fantastic, his masterpiece. And then he started working on Fast and Furious 7, which I think is cool.
Wait,
I don't
he's
care.
doing that?
He's doing the Fast and Furious movie, but he said he's done with horror movies, and that's
No,
insane.
Now
say it
that
ain't so.
is
Didn't he-
breaking my heart.
He's
I-
going to
I'm
realize
pretty-
that. he
I'm pretty
can't do
sure
that.
he's already said he's going to do Conjuring 2. Or
That's
a
in the
sequel.
works.
I just read an interview with him today to figure out if that was a real thing that he was finished, and the only thing I saw was that there are rumors. He's kind of alluded to the fact that he might remake the next Saw, which would be cool. It'd be the original makers of the Saw, not like all the terrible.
Do they need another?
I mean, they would do something completely
Yeah.
different.
He would. I mean, I think he's got enough sense. I mean, you can look at The Conjuring, and he's more than competent.
He's very mature
Yeah,
now.
that franchise has been.
I mean,
bled
we've
dry.
basically watched that director mature, like from first movie to
Yeah.
end. And think about this: he'll have 10 times the budget he had for
Yeah,
the original
yeah,
Saw.
yeah.
That'll be
Yeah.
interesting.
All right, my fifth, I totally wrestled with, and I still am not completely sold on this because I have so many movies that I actually like more that are not in this position. But I had to mention this one, so I think it's on there, and that's Trick or Treat,
Solid choice.
which I think is the best Halloween movie. I know, Devin.
Yeah, I mean,
Do you remember Halloween?
It's there. No, but Halloween, despite its title, has very little to do with the
Yeah.
holiday.
That's fair.
And
Yeah, I agree.
I love the holiday, and Trick or Treat is just a love letter.
For sure.
I have to agree. It's basically just like fan service for the holiday. It's
Yeah,
so
and
delicious.
It's so well paced. Like just everything is fun. It's a bunch of vignettes, but it manages to weave them all together
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't feel artificial. It doesn't feel like there's like actual breaks between them,
Dare I say
and everything
the most-
ties together.
Let me say it. Yeah, I really do agree.
I think the one thing I thought of was like, dare I say, the most charming horror movie
Oh, for
ever
sure.
made.
Yeah.
It's up
And
there.
saying that about a movie that's got like decapitations in it
Sure.
and stuff, but it's
I know.
That's a compliment.
yeah, it's really charming.
Yeah.
I think it's
Um,
just a testament. I mean, if you look at the movie, like it just has it all. It's
Yeah.
charming. It's beautiful. It's a great color palette.
Directed by the guy who did fucking X-Men.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's actually quite scary for
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
portion of it, which is just
So
makes me want to watch it more.
The
Do you-
bus stuff is
Yeah, that was
brilliant.
truly scary. But it definitely, we're saying that because we know it is definitely made with comedic elements,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
pretty self-referential.
Well, my fifth spot I wanted to give because I like the horror comedy genre when it's done right a lot,
Sure.
and I wanted to give a spot to one of those, and so I actually wrestled with that or Cabin in the Woods, which I like a lot more. But the more that you and I talked about this, Dev,
Right.
Cabin in the Woods isn't honestly a
I was
horror
going to say,
movie.
I'm very glad you
Trick or Treat
kind of
is still a horror
I'm
movie.
glad
you
you
say-
went
I
for
think you
Trick or
made the right
Treat.
choice on it.
do you say that because it's like a horror parody, basically?
It's too tongue in cheek.
It's purely
It's essentially
parody,
a comedy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember being. Although
There are a
this-
couple of spooky moments,
I
also feel like
don't
a-
remember.
but it's an
Right.
action. It's an action movie more than anything.
Right.
Yeah, parody, action, and a comedy. I mean,
Comedy. It's a great comedy.
It's hilarious.
Hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant deconstruction of the genre. But I would prefer that deconstructions to still have horror elements.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that one has the least amount, especially versus
Trick or Treat.
Trick or Treat.
Yeah. That's why I had to give it to Trick or Treat.
And I
Yeah, I
love
think you
good
made the perfect
Halloween
choice.
movies. That's a good point because, like Dylan said, we all love and adore like the season of
Oh, God
the
bless. That's
holidays.
That's why we do it now.
Halloween, and I haven't seen enough Halloween movies this year. I haven't
Whoa.
even seen Halloween or rewatched Halloween yet. I haven't seen one, but there's a few that are floating around. I want to watch Season of the Witch or Halloween
yeah, we need to
3.
do that.
I do want to rewatch Halloween, the original. I want to rewatch Trick or Treat. but there's just so many.
Well, I make a point of revisiting Trick or Treat every year, which is why it had to end up on there. It's
Yeah.
Can we include it in our list this year? I haven't watched it in a while.
yeah, we should.
I mean, we gotta watch a Halloween movie. I mean,
We
we're
need to
getting
watch
close.
WNUF.
Oh, that's gonna be an awesome
Can you
one.
find it? I thought that was
I
really
have it.
difficult to.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
We will find that, and
I think we should watch that
I've
in
been
the
reading
list.
about it.
I
It
don't
looks
understand.
really fun, and we're gonna
Well,
do that
enough.
for our outdoor marathon next week.
Cool. All right, Blutz.
Okay, I guess it's kind of appropriate that Dylan and I are sitting very close together because I kind
Wonderfully
of
close.
want to piggyback off of what you said. Like the way I constructed my list, there was no way I was going to say 5-1. This is my favorites, except for number one, because unquestionably number one is perfect on my list, and you're all wrong. So
it's on my list.
when we get to that,
I think it's
I
on
actually
most
don't think it
people's.
is. So when I get to it, you're just going to realize how bad your list is. But on my list, like I was mentioning earlier, I think there's so much beauty to be found in the quote unquote horror genre. So that I try to kind of pick different aspects of that to kind of highlight what I love about the different pieces. And like at the end of the day, I was looking at my list, and not many of them actually scare me that much anymore. So I had to include a couple in there that gave me genuine scares. And my number 5 actually shuffled when the other two casters gave me Evil Dead. But I want to pick a movie that I was basically swapping out for it, which is Return of the Living Dead.
Great choice. Yes.
Return
So, like-
of the Living Dead, set in Louisville, Kentucky,
But
where
not
we're
filmed
based
there
at.
at all.
Not
Which is
filmed
weird.
there, set there.
They could only afford the painting of the skyline in the background.
Honestly, it felt like that.
Such a
The
good
reference to Louisville in that movie was just like I feel like they just picked a
Throwaway
random
there,
city,
yeah.
like
for sure.
Yeah, I don't
Like,
even know
I-
why
Some
they did that.
city nobody gives a shit about. Yeah.
because they
That
really
shitty shithole.
It
It's
takes
only
so long for
mentions-
them to mention it. Am I
No, it's
remembering
either-
that?
you
literally
need a
they
medical
just at the
supply
very
in
end of the
Louisville.
movie
It's
he
so
says
funny.
Louisville, Kentucky.
It's like such a small
and it's
point,
so
though.
funny because when they say it in the most dramatic way possible. Because
Yeah.
I remember it's like this high octane general, and like it pans in, and the music kind of like gets to like this creepy part, and he goes, "They're like, where is it?" And he's like, Louisville, Kentucky. And
I
I
thought-
just started laughing. I, was like,
I never thought that
why?
was like they put too much reference on that, because when I saw it first, it was like a midnight movie, and everybody's like,
Yeah,
"Wow,"
sure.
because we were there. But yeah, they do. Like
From an outside
he
perspective,
makes
you're
a
like, wait,
weird
why do
deal
they
out
make
of
that
it.
dramatic? Who gives a shit? Like,
I don't think it's made by anybody from Louisville. It's just,
no.
No, I don't think so.
And of course, back then Louisville was not like an up and coming
No,
like.
no.
I'm pretty
But
sure we're
great
still not,
city.
buddy. Let's just
Yeah,
point
yeah.
it out.
Well, but Blutz, like,
No.
what specifically about that movie makes it?
Well, kind of like exactly what just happened, right? I say the name of the movie, and like your
Yeah.
face just kind of
Yeah.
lighted up, and you all just giggled like little kids. Like
Great movie.
I wouldn't necessarily say the movie's scary. It does have a couple jumps, right?
Yeah.
But like for me, it's one of the best zombie movies, just because it's so charming.
Yeah.
It doesn't take
Again,
itself
yeah,
seriously,
charming.
and I don't know. Like you see its predecessor, and you see these two directors spawn off, and they kind of go their own ways. And for me, I wish I had a Return of the Living Dead saga. Like I wish I had 2, 3, 4, and
There
5.
are.
Really?
They're
I've
not
never seen
very
them. They're
good.
supposed to be terrible.
Yeah,
That's
they're
probably
not.
exactly why I haven't heard of them. I'm
That's
It's
kind of
hilarious
embarrassed I
because
didn't
it's
know that.
already based off of a Night of the Living Dead and stuff.
Yeah.
Right,
So they
right.
Well,
make
it's like a
Return of the Living Dead and then Return of the Living Dead 2.
Also, interesting trivia note: it's the first movie to have zombies who wanted to eat brains.
Oh yeah, that's
There you
true.
go. That's where the
and
whole
they
myth
they
comes
can
from.
talk
See,
too.
that's why I
which is
picked
weird.
it groundbreaking.
Oh,
But
those zombies were hilarious when they like would get hacked up into
Yeah.
multiple pieces and still
Yeah.
just be like chilling.
So-
more paramedics.
That's exactly what it is. Like horror comedy. Like I really appreciate a good scare, but I thought the movie was so
It's great.
fun
It's
and
great.
charming and
Am I-
genuinely
okay.
funny, and just it was really engaging. It just kept me locked in the
Here's
whole
a
time.
question I have about that movie specifically, and movies like that, is when I watched it, I completely echoed everything you just said. It was fun, charming. It was just so great, especially on my projector, like an 80s movie. But is there part of the charm, the datedness about like the graininess of the camera and the sounds and the fact that it is made in the 80s?
Yeah, I
Or-
don't think you could make it.
You
now.
couldn't remake that
No.
now and be like, oh, that movie, and people wouldn't receive it nearly that well, right?
But it's one of those movies that I see it and I'm like, God, this is a labor of love. Everybody enjoyed doing this movie.
That's exactly why I love you. I feel like you can feel that,
Yeah.
but at the same time, for me, I can't really speak to that because I freaking love the '80s, and so
yeah, the
the
70s and 80s, I feel like there's a certain charm to them.
it's just beautiful. So yeah, that's my number 5. I swapped it out for Evil Dead. Obviously, we beat Evil Dead
Yeah.
to death.
I mean,
so.
I think we all agree that for the most part, our favorite movies and top 5 is such a tough task.
It's so hard.
But I
I
think
had to
that-
sacrifice movies that I adore or that make me feel more scared than anything else. But
That's
Well,
what you got to do.
I guess.
Um,
Sorry, did you want to continue on?
I was just going to say that I think that 5, we're looking at a pretty broad blanket there, but I think as we get 4, 3, 2, 1, I think that you're going to see some pretty serious deviation.
Yeah, for sure. My list is so atypical. I'm
Boring.
I'm almost hesitant to even say, but oh man. In fact, I'm still wrestling over what's going where. To be honest.
Well, hell, go to 4. Let's see how your
Yeah,
list looks.
I'm ready.
Well, I'm telling you, 4, 3, and 2 to this second, I'm wrestling over where they go. But I'm gonna say my number 4. It's a very interesting pick that you won't find on many lists unless they're like very specialized lists. It's a movie that affected me. I don't think you may know. I don't know. It's a movie that affected me when I first watched it, and it's a movie that is the epitome of relentless, and it's scary and it's awesome and it's fun, and it is Shakushin Ari, or One Missed Call, the original Japanese One Missed Call from I would imagine the early 2000s. That movie, if you give it one word, is just relentless. It's scary from the beginning, from the get-go. There's very few lulls in it, and it has some of the most relentless creative kills I've seen in any movie ever.
Mike, the director, doesn't know the meaning of subtlety.
Oh, he's I think he's just insane.
He is an insane person.
What's his name?
Takashi Miike.
Okay, yeah.
He did Audition.
Yeah.
Oh,
He's insane.
boy.
Yeah, he is.
And this was kind of
actually.
on his wind down era when he wasn't putting out great stuff anymore.
But it was also one of his most approachable movies because usually
Sure.
he's just batshit. But this is a really
Yeah.
well put together movie.
It's fun. I mean, it's not, again, something you're going to find on the greatest movies in the horror genre, but it's one that if you're looking for something scary, just scary and relentless and thrilling, this is the movie. It is so scary.
We can't talk about this movie without talking about one particular scene, and I don't want to spoil it.
Well, here's the thing
don't.
that I'm loving right now is you're saying one scene, and I can think of 20 that you might be talking about.
But you know the one that's just nobody's done it before.
Well, hit me with a hint. You mean
TV.
The TV scene, yeah.
Holy shit.
No spoilers. Okay, so like, I feel embarrassed being in this conversation and not having seen this movie, but it's kind of to the point of this podcast to discover new stuff. So like, I'm probably gonna go and I'm gonna put this on my top list to
And
go
you
watch
should.
next.
You definitely
Brandon,
should.
don't worry, I haven't seen it either. So
Dylan,
We've been
really?
watching it
Yeah,
now.
I didn't realize that.
Goodness gracious.
Hold
Well,
hands.
on Dylan's point, he's referring to a scene. Again, I don't want spoilers, but they take every comfort zone thing that you're used to in every movie,
Toss
every
it out.
reference, and they just toss it out the window.
It's just-
Nothing is safe.
Everything in your head when you've watched a movie and be like, well, if I was in this situation, I would have done this, and I would have done that. They just shit
I
on
think
And
that.
it's
There's
like,
a
oh
little
my
worse.
god.
I guess I'm screwed. I mean, that's it. And
It effectively. I mean, Japanese movies tend to do this, especially where like the ghost or whatever it is cannot be stopped.
yeah, it's
And this
unstoppable.
one nails that. Because like Ju-on it's not in my list, but I wish it was because it's the
that's
scariest
awesome
movie
too.
out
It's
there.
scary
Like
as
you're
hell.
It's
wrestling with your
terrifying.
Yeah.
But it can't be stopped. But this one does it even better.
And
Shakushin does.
It's another thing about the relentlessness is like it's the type of movie where when you think it's winding down or it's over, you're way off. I mean, there's 2, 3, 4 other parts
Such a good movie.
that you're missing. It's great and it's fun. And don't go into with a perspective that it's going to be this classic with an amazing script and beautiful act. It's a fun, scary.
To
movie.
clarify, do not watch the American version.
Oh, don't watch One Missed Call, the American version. This
Terrible.
is the Japanese one. It's called Shakushin Ari.
And do not watch Shakushin 2, which is awful.
I have seen that one. I will say that.
Awful.
I watched that with you guys, and you guys the whole time were just like, "Oh, this is nothing. Not even close to the original."
It's bad.
The concept, if you guys don't know, it's a very cheesy Japanesey concept, but I'm into that sometimes. It's people would get calls from their own number with a very, like, literally actually a really, really scary ringtone that, like, you hear it and you get chills. And it's from their own number, and they literally get a voicemail that's of themselves dying. So it's a funny, cheesy.
The concept's
This premise
absurd.
could not be
Oh,
cheesier.
Concept's absurd.
Oh, it's hilarious, but that's why you got
It's
to
executed so
Yeah,
well.
that's why you got to go into it with
That's
a certain
exactly the
perspective,
point,
certain mindset, and it will scare you. It's fun.
That's what I like about this group, though, is the face value, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't really care if I go into a movie and it has A+ acting and the most
No doubt.
reinventive plot, and I'm just gonna get a huge boner. Like, I just want them to execute well, and just like deliver, on that promise they started at the beginning. And like from the sounds of it, this has definitely got it.
Right.
One of the things I want to say that I just love about you guys is that I don't think I've ever once heard anybody say, "If I was there, I would do
Yeah.
this.
God,
Because
no.
There's nothing worse to me than that line.
saying it out loud is the worst. But
Makes
you,
me actually
But you
cringe,
naturally think it. You're like,
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
But that approach to horror movies where you're just like, well, I wouldn't do that. That complete lack of suspension of disbelief
Oh, it's
kills
horrible.
me.
Exactly.
and that's what ruins movies like this is people with that kind of mindset. But
But if you take that out, oh my God, it's totally worth a watch.
I'm
Good call.
excited to watch that.
it's fun. Yeah. You want to move on? Number 4.
Move
Sure.
on.
So for me, my number 4, I went with Hellraiser.
Nice.
Good. Yeah.
Beautiful choice.
Good call.
Yeah, Hellraiser is just a lot of fun, and that's something that I
Is
think
it?
I like. Yeah, it is. It is.
It's a lot
Not
of
how
fun.
I would
Does it make you
really
feel
approach
warm,
it.
buddy?
Oh yeah, hell.
Well,
That's
I guess what I'm getting at is that like it doesn't take itself too seriously.
No, it's for sure.
Yeah,
Like,
it's tongue in cheek.
It is a bit, and like I think for me something that I maybe feel a bit differently than say Devin or possibly Dylan is I do get into the really campy stuff, and I do love all the cheesy stuff. For my top 5, I didn't go as many of those, but it's just too hard for me to pick. I don't usually like to make lists of things. I have a hard time like.
It's
hard.
It's just
Yeah.
fun to but it's so fun to listen to.
It was a good exercise. Yeah.
But anyways, Hellraiser has everything. It has just some of the most amazing practical effects you'll ever see.
God, yes.
Mixed with some questionable ones, like at the very end
Yeah.
of the movie, where something weird happens. But like the scene with I don't think this is a spoiler, but the body melting through the floor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry. Being sort of
Risen from the floor.
Yeah.
risen
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the floor.
yeah.
Reanimated.
You could say reanimated.
You could say that, but that's the wrong movie.
Yeah, oops. But it's got a lot going for it. It has an interesting story. Something that I really like about it a lot is that it has a very fleshed out universe.
Yeah, the mythos is great.
Right, and it knows it knows the rules of its own universe very
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Well put.
But it's a good one.
Well, and everybody's seen like Pinhead. They've seen the Cenobites. They know
Yeah.
what they look
I know
like.
they're
But
so
they're just
famous.
not in the movie for the most part.
Yeah.
Well, that's
And
what's weird.
it works really well without them.
I was expecting a lot of Pinhead and like basically a serial killer. Like
And that's-
slasher
I
type
think
movie
that's
when
where,
I
like-
first went into it, and I was pleasantly surprised.
The
Right.
sequels, and I haven't seen them all, but the ones that I have seen are fucking
Oh,
terrible.
God.
yeah, well,
they
the
are
sequels, they were like they saw what they had with Pinhead as far as a
they
marketing
go too far
standpoint.
with that. But the first one is just, I don't know. It's kind of like a Lovecraft type of thing where it's just really
Oh, it's fun.
off, and that's what I like. I like the stuff that makes me uneasy, and that movie makes me incredibly uneasy.
Absolutely, it's just so gross. I don't know, like, I hate to like point this out as my favorite point, but when I like Hellraiser actually danced in and out of my list several times, and it was because of the effects, right? Like,
Yeah.
whenever you talk horror, inevitably someone's going to say the word practical effects.
That's a
and you're
fa-
inevitably
favorite
going to
of
compare it to
Yeah.
CGI.
many of us.
And I hate that, but the fact of the matter is, Hellraiser absolutely just made me sit down and think, holy shit, practical effects are disgusting,
They're better.
and they just absolutely envelop you, and they play a perfect role in my number one, and
Yeah, mine too.
they
I
just,
don't- yeah,
that movie
I-
just
yeah.
changed my perspective.
We're
on
gonna
that.
have some more practical effects conversations in this.
Yeah, I think it's something that
podcast.
we all value.
Yeah,
I don't want to sound snobby or anything, but to me personally, practical effects done well, honestly, even done horribly most of the time,
Yeah,
are
true.
just they're just scarier. There's just something so
Well,
synthetic
they look
about
real.
CGI that pulls me out of it,
and they're fun.
even just crappy practical effects look gross. I can see the pain in the actors' faces, so they're getting sloshed around in this fluids.
Yeah,
And
they had
like-
to actually be there. They had
Exactly. I can
to
just
live
see
the
their
horror.
discomfort, and they're horrified through that. And so Hellraiser for me was almost on my list because of that. It just changed my perspective. It made me think, effects are important.
Sweet pick. My fourth, I don't think is going to be on anybody else's list except maybe Manton.
Try me, Dad.
Although I think it's probably one that he considered but never put on, and that's The Descent.
Ooh,
I love this movie.
So
It came out of nowhere, and it came out of like a particularly rough year for horror, where there's just like nothing else.
well, yeah, I would say that 2006 to 2010.
Yeah, just
range.
bad. But this one it's also notable for being one of the few horror movies that like Roger Ebert loved.
Yeah,
And I get it because it works as two different movies. For those of you who don't know the plot of it, basically there's like a group of 7 or so women who go on a retreat to spelunk in a cave because that's what they want to do on their retreat for some
that's
dumb
normal,
reason.
right?
Yeah. And they get stuck in the cave and shit goes wild. but before the shit goes wild, when they're just in the cave, it's already terrifying. Because if you have any bit of claustrophobia in you, and I don't, but it made me claustrophobic.
I do, and it was terrifying.
It's rough.
I think that's a major point on it is to play with your claustrophobia.
But the best thing that movie does, and it's something that I see in so few horror movies, even the ones that I love, is that it really sets up the characters and makes you care about them. So by the time they start dying, you're like, God, it hurts even more because they're well fleshed out, and because they're really well acted. It's got great acting.
One thing I want to point out about that is like, this movie isn't super long, so this character evolution is done so tastefully
really
and quick.
quickly.
And like, to me, pacing is really important. It's actually becoming almost annoyingly important to me in movies. And like, The Descent almost went on my list. I just thought it was too obvious, so I wanted to pull it out a little bit. Actually, I don't know how I could say that looking at my list, but either way, like, Descent just has amazing pacing, and it's almost valid as two separate movies because, like Dylan was saying, it really breaks it up, and you really care about both parts, like the movie as a whole, because of those pieces. And
also has, if you're going to watch it, get a hold of the UK ending, not the redone American ending. The American ending's terrible.
Yeah.
The UK ending is one of the best.
I actually don't know
and it's like there's just this aura of hopelessness to the whole movie, and it doesn't end on a positive note. I'll put it that way. But it's great.
When did that movie come out? Am I right?
It's like 2006,
2007 or something like that. I knew I wasn't.
We were.
Yeah, it was like my freshman year of college, so that would have been like 2007, I think.
I saw it in theaters, and I haven't seen it since.
I did too.
I've been meaning to revisit it, honestly.
Great.
I can't imagine in theater what the experience would be.
Oh,
different.
it was. Oh God.
That's one of my things. Like, I saw The Descent kind of early on in like my movie appreciation phase, I guess, and so I think very highly of it. But I probably need to revisit it to really kind of slot it into my list.
Yeah. That's mine.
All right, so my 4, like I said, like everybody else, I had a pretty beefy list, and I had to really shed it down. And kind of to my point earlier, I wanted to focus on movies that highlighted points of scary movies that I like. And so my number 4, without further ado, is The Shining.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if I think a lot of people probably wouldn't consider it horror. If
I think
I would, absolutely.
I think most people
really.
would.
Okay, that's good. That's
it's
good.
But it is debated for sure.
But it is debatable.
Okay, so I have to just include The Shining for 2 plain reasons. One, pacing. Okay, so I say pacing.
Slow-ass movie.
No, let me just say. So pacing, and Devin rips me for this all the time because he thinks I'm a cretin, and I need to have violence, and I need to have blood and gore, and I love those things, right? But I think that a movie needs to have pacing that sets it up to succeed, right? If a movie's going to be slow and then explode at the end, I wouldn't necessarily say that was a well-paced movie.
Yeah.
The Shining is paced perfectly in that it's just horrendously slow, but that entire build-up, mixed with musical scores and just character kind of development, makes you feel extremely uneasy.
Yeah.
And then the delivery of the scares at the end has actually like altered me. Like, I will never forget the first time I watched The Shining because I had to leave the room. I was so disturbed by some of these scenes.
It is a deeply, deeply unsettling movie.
It's more unsettling, and like, I mean, I have to commend Kubrick. Like, so there's so many still shots, and it just pains me to watch that movie because it's so hard. Like, and when things start going crazy, it just makes me feel really uneasy and just awful. And just to this day, I'm so scared by some of the scenes in that movie. And to me, that's exactly why I put it on the pacing.
Definitely had some of the most terrifying imagery of its time. And
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that despite the slow pace, which we're talking about, I think scares and unease was peppered in pretty well without it being like bottom heavy or whatever, like saving up all the thrills and scares to the end. I don't think they did that. I think they kept it pretty consistent throughout.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Dylan.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's definitely not a movie for every occasion. It's something you have to kind of...
It's a commitment.
You gotta sit down and
it's a commitment, yeah. You have to get in the mindset. But if you can get that pinpoint precise kind of mood, get yourself in and watch it, it's damn scary.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely one that I would put on the scary side of movies. I mean, it's definitely...
Yeah.
It's a masterpiece. It's great, but it's legitimately terrifying.
To this day, my father cannot watch that movie because he used to be an innkeeper in Maine.
Oh,
Yeah.
my gosh.
And
it's
too real.
Yep.
That's amazing.
And that came out, I mean, that's early, right? 80s? 70s or 80s?
So late 70s.
Something like that. But yeah.
Might have been 80s.
And it holds
No,
up.
I'm pretty sure it's 70s if I remember.
It holds up really well. It's certainly terrifying.
Yeah, I don't know. I really want to include it in there because just almost a slight Devin. just because you can have two different spectrums of pacing, and I think Shining's on the far end of one.
Yeah.
Plus, I just have a Kubrick boner. I can't help it, man.
You and every film major.
Yeah.
So something that I wanted to say about that is I've actually never watched The Shining all the way through.
What?
Yeah, not
Understandable.
once.
I mean,
It's yeah.
I've seen parts of it. Now, the one thing that's weird about that movie is like it's so ingrained into popular culture, and like you know, as someone who hasn't seen the movie, I know almost everything about it. I've seen almost everything about it, and it sucks. And I wish I didn't have that because it's kind of keeping me from watching it.
Yeah.
I wish I could go into it not knowing what's going to happen, but I pretty much know exactly what happens.
You're right, Blutz, that has... I mean, the reason that they're in popular culture, though, man, is they're just indelible scenes.
Exactly.
They're really effective.
Yeah, which is great, but I'm just saying, like, it does make you think, like, what would it be like to watch that, you know, in theaters when it released, like, knowing nothing about it.
Sitting
That would have been
theater.
terrifying.
That would have been amazing.
So amazing. I would have had to walk out.
And that's kind of why I have sort of tried recently to avoid. I try to look into like what people think about movies, but I try to watch very few trailers and look at very few.
To that effect, I think actually, like we were saying about being there when it was first shown, I think that's the reason why people like The Exorcist so much. They were there, and it was the only thing doing what it was at that time.
For sure.
I want to put some contention against that. Like, if I had a time machine and I could teleport to these times and experience these movies in that bubble, I'm sure they'd be way better and have a better appreciation. But unfortunately, I try to go into every movie and just look at it like, this is the time that I'm in 2014. I have to watch it as 2014 Brandon, unfortunately.
I appreciate that about your perspective, Blutz, that you do go in completely face value on everything. We don't always.
It hurts some things.
Yeah, sometimes it does.
Yeah, I think Blutz is definitely maybe the most face value when it comes to that. I'm probably second most.
Give yourself a pat on
but
that.
I do the same thing. I mean, but I watch The Shining and it holds up completely well. Whereas I do think The Exorcist, if we're using that as an example, does take a hit since 1973.
Also, not as scary if you're not Catholic.
Maybe.
That's kind of what people always say.
It's why I mean, like my mom is terrified of that movie, and I don't give a shit.
I don't think it's scary at all.
Yeah,
exactly. It's just different facets of the genre. That's what I love. But I think the Shining kind of almost suffers from what Devin was talking about earlier. It's like the Evil Dead syndrome. The name almost precedes the movie.
Yeah.
You have like this pop culture idea of it. It's just like, man, he's kind of perverted to The Shining now because he's seen all the images. He knows everything. It's just not the same. So,
just so we're not pissing anybody off here, we all appreciate
good movie.
The Exorcism. We love
but
it.
at the same time, we fucking hate
But
The Exorcism.
The Exorcism of
The
Emily
Exorcist.
Rose.
Sorry,
Exorcist.
There's other ones floating in my head that I just recently
Last
watched.
Exorcism,
Like
good,
The Last Exorcism
good flick.
and Exorcism of Emily Rose. But
surprisingly,
yeah, The Exorcist is great, but I just think it is more dated than a lot of the other classics like Shining, for example, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or Halloween. And I'm just surprised mainly that it tops so many lists of the best or scariest movies of all time. I think that it should be up there. It should be revered, but I don't think by any means it's the best horror movie.
I agree. It didn't even make consideration for my list, but I love the movie. I don't love it as a horror movie.
I love the movie. I liked it, but yeah, it's not. It shouldn't be topping every list.
I wouldn't even say I loved it.
It's more like
that's
the
fair.
I mean, that's
circumcision
fine.
for
Yeah, I've seen.
You have no idea how long I was holding that.
I've seen more recent Exorcism movies that I liked more, like the last Exorcism. I thought was
it's
quite good,
really good.
And I know that's blasphemy to say, but people are gonna hate that. But it's just, if we're talking face value, that movie was well done and really scary. And I'm not gonna say it was better done than The Exorcist, but
no, it's a found footage
scarier.
movie. It's not better done.
Found footage is the
but
best
in my opinion, it's way scarier. For its time, I'm sure The Exorcist was way scarier. But 1973, and obviously the last Exorcism is going to borrow a ton from it. But I'd say, face to face, if I was watching them both right now, I would lean towards. As far as scares go, I would go towards the newer one, I guess.
So Devin, we've heard a lot about movies you don't like.
Yeah, tell us your number three.
Oh, speaking of movies people don't like, this is going to be the
Insidious.
unpopular one. Yeah, this is the movie that in the past 4 or 5 years that I can remember is one that affected me the most. It legitimately terrified me when I watched it. I watched it in the middle of the night. it was kind of on the back burner. I didn't expect to see it. I didn't really know much about it, so I just popped it in. And I was just caught so off guard because that movie, again, it's by James Wan, the master of scares. That's what his strong point is. And again, it's not the most well-rounded, not the best written movie. It's the acting's not terrible, but it's not going to win any Oscars. The actors in that movie are pretty decent actors. Literally one of them's in The Conjuring.
I actually agree.
The main actors are.
And again, let me state first off, that movie terrified me, and part of the reason is it's a very fresh concept on an old kind of genre of this like possession. Demon type genre. It was a very weird, interesting twist on that put me in a place where I had nothing to grab onto, nothing to refer to that I'm used to in movies before it, where you get possessed by these things that are just literally possessing you because they're malicious or insidious, and it's not necessarily.
That's the name of the movie.
I mean,
Well played, sir.
Obviously that's the name.
Good job, James.
But and the way they do it is not through anything religious, really. It's just it doesn't have much to do with, Catholicism or religion,
Nothing,
which I think
actually.
is what.
Nothing. Actually.
Yeah, so that's why I think it kind of like takes it to a different, newer, more freaky level of just like everybody could be possessed by these. I don't remember what they're called.
Well, anybody could be possessed by a Darth Maul. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. Okay, so I've been biting my tongue here on this one. I have to weigh in. Insidious, great first half, but god damn, that second half is off the rails.
I completely disagree.
I like
How
the
do you
second
mean?
half.
it's off the rails in a good way for me.
Yeah, same.
Dylan, can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
It's like a fucking carnival funhouse ride.
It is.
And it literally is
It's
in
scary.
some parts. And I don't dig that.
It's like a nightmare.
Where they like enter the further or whatever
Yeah,
they
it
call it,
is.
which is
The
it's
Further,
bullshit name. Where they're going through that, that bit in like the second house is legitimately scary. But the entity or whatever that's actually doing it is just comical.
That was a little bit of a misstep.
It's a big misstep.
He wasn't scary, but I think Manny might even disagree with that. I think I recall you kind of liking that entity.
Yeah, I did. It's funny that Dylan says comical because I was actually going to relate it to comics. Like, it almost feels like a movie that was a comic book and then sort of made into a movie. It's not, but it has that comic book feel to it. Like, the main character almost reminds me of this. I could see like a sequel going in. I guess they did.
There
a
is
sequel
in
that I didn't
Shittiness
see.
Crafter too.
What I was sort of seeing of that was like it was almost like his origin story. He becomes this person who is sort of like fighting off this demon, and then I could see them kind of going into that more. Him going off and fighting
Well, the ending
other
is
demons.
straight up sequel bait. It's
Basically,
a good ending, actually.
it
I do
felt
like the
The
ending.
very ending's great.
Yeah, I like
the movie to me felt like it had this like kind of similar to what I saw with Hellraiser. It has this universe and it has this. Clearly, they had this vision for like the Further or whatever. It felt very comic book to me, which was kind of cool.
I went into it expecting something different, and part of that is also James Wan's fault for making me expect that with the first
That's
half of the
true.
film.
Absolutely.
That's
They are
fair.
completely
They're
different
completely
films.
different.
They
Yep.
are.
The opening is like classic ghost story, really, really well executed scares. Again, I mean, he does great stuff. There's one scene in particular, the tiptoe through the tulips thing,
Yeah,
that
for
is just
sure.
fantastic.
Yeah, that was good.
And I've never seen what it does, actually.
Oh, that was very new to me.
But I don't know. It becomes another movie, and a movie that I'm not as fond of in the second half.
Yeah, it's just another one of those examples where when I look at it, look back on it as a whole, I just remember that movie did it for me. And I've rewatched
Time and place.
it many a time, and it holds up every time I revisit it. I think the scares are still there. I think it still keeps me on my toes. But that movie was the scariest movie that I watched at the time since I can remember, since way, way back in the day, because that movie put me in a very dark, terrifying place when I watched it, to where there were points where I had to like take my phone out and just start like randomly looking at Twitter and text to like kind of get myself out of the moment. And that doesn't happen to me very often. I've been quite desensitized, and for that I gotta give it some props.
No, Devin, I'm really with you on this one. Like, I don't know. I think one of the things I take away from this discussion is that kind of your opinion going in is really
Right.
powerful, and I think that your perspective on what you're going to see it really shapes kind of what you're going into.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
so like when I watched Insidious, I watched it with my ex who was just a dirtbag. She was awful. But
she's the real
listening, what are you
horror
gonna
here.
do?
but she sorry, it was like, so I put this movie on. I have no expectations. And I don't know, like kind of following with Juan's previous what am I trying to say? Like his previous masterpieces. It starts out strong, and I think the ambience throughout the whole movie is pretty consistent. I think that what you all said, on the second half, there are points to detract from it, but at the same time, the movie was genuinely scary, and that's why I think highly of Insidious. Overall, yeah, it's not a masterpiece. It's not going to make it to a top 100 list, but I think that overall, it was really scary and it was horrifying, and for me, like that kind of ingrains it in my mind and makes it valid to me.
On that point, I gotta say something bold that I don't know if we've ever discussed, but in my opinion, this is bold. I think it's
How bold of
easier.
you.
I think it's I think it's easier to make a good movie than a scary movie. I really
Yep.
do think that.
Can you elaborate on that? Like, I
I think that
agree
there are
with you.
far more good, well-made horror movies out there than genuinely scary
Yes.
horror movies. I
agree.
think it takes real ability and skill to make a movie genuinely scary.
But it also has to do with what you expect out of a horror movie, and
Sure.
you go for thrills and scares.
It's a little subjective.
And I
yeah.
go for that like long burn, and Insidious was not a long burn. for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
It
But I
just
think
didn't
when a
give me what I wanted.
director makes a movie that scares me, I kind of have this like bravo moment, like wow, good
Exactly, and
job.
Juan is just, it's almost hilarious to me because some of his movies have the silliest premises.
Yeah.
If you
They
actually
do,
sit
yeah.
down and you write what they're about, you probably want to punch yourself in the face. It's so bad. This one's going to be about dolls.
It does.
And they kill you because they're,
it
whatever.
does legitimately amaze me that he gets movies made, or that he did. To begin
Yeah.
with.
But I mean, just look at it. I mean, like, that's what I love about the horror genre is it almost doesn't matter
Yeah.
how silly it
Yeah,
is.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Movies can still have great ambience and scare the ever living shit out of you. And Insidious for me, like,
Yeah.
it's not a masterwork, but hot damn, it was really scary.
Yeah, and that's usually what I value the most in a horror movie. And that's not to say like we love you film directors
Right,
out there. We
yeah.
are nobodies when it comes to that. We're just criticizing them. But and making a good horror movie is quite the feat. It's an
I
amazing
agree.
And
feat. But I think making a scary movie is just so difficult these days.
Dev, not to sidetrack, but this issue of me having an issue with the last half of the film
Yeah.
brings up a big disagreement that we have, and I know that it's going to be about a movie that's further up on your list.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll burn that bridge when we come to it.
So, Devin, I think there was a lot of good discussion on your three. I
Yeah,
think we
let's-
all
let's
agree
move
that
on.
one.
Move on.
All right, let's do
Three.
it. So, back on the track of like things that legitimately scared me. This one we went into knowing absolutely nothing about, and that made a
yes.
big.
Is this what I think it
Yeah,
is?
I
I think
is.
it probably is. The fact that I went into this movie expecting nothing. In fact, we started this movie up, and I was ready to laugh.
Yeah.
I was ready to just rip this movie apart. It looked awful at first. It's great. Noroi.
Noroi, yeah.
Oh,
Japanese
boy.
movie. I think it's called The Curse.
The Curse,
Totally the
Yeah.
curse, yes.
God, it's so
um,
good.
Such a
I-
gem.
Yeah, that's
I'll give it
become-
that. It is a gem.
Absolutely.
It is a gem. It's a diamond. Anyway, it's a movie that's sort of become. I can't think of horror without thinking of that movie.
Yeah.
And if someone talks to me about what's a good movie I should watch that maybe I've never heard of that is
Yes.
legitimately
Yeah.
scary,
Yeah.
That's one of the top. Yeah.
I always
top of the
recommend
list.
that movie terrified me. And like I just want to say like The Ring and or the original Japanese Ring and
Yeah.
and Ju-on.
Ju-on.
Both of those didn't really do it for me.
Yeah.
I neither of those scared me. I don't know what it was. And I watched those around the same time too. But anyway, Noroi has so much going for it. It's terrifying. It's sort of like a mystery. You're sort of watching the main
Absolutely.
character unfold this mystery.
Mhm.
And it's got great characters. It's got
Yeah.
good writing.
Yeah.
Every character in that movie is
Including one who could have
relatable.
easily been a joke.
Yep, a character that could have easily been a joke ends up being one of the most likable
Great,
characters in
yeah.
the movie. It's a guy with some like mental problems and he's kind of crazy.
Wears a tinfoil hat. I mean, he seems like a
it's-
character.
And it's at
You
first
actually laugh at him at
You
first.
laugh at him at first, but it's not played for laughs. Like he's a good character.
Yeah.
You just realize you're an asshole,
Yeah.
and then 20 minutes in,
It makes you reevaluate yourself.
20
Right.
minutes in, you're hanging on his every word.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just a very well paced movie as well.
It does just weird things that
It
I've
does
never
very
seen
weird
other
things.
movies do.
Something that I really like that it does. I would say typically you would want to avoid showing the monster, so to speak, and
Yes.
you want to what you don't see scares you the most. This movie goes a complete opposite route. The scariest parts of the movie are when they freeze frame on the scary thing
For
Yeah.
so
and zoom
long.
in
And then
while
crank
playing
those
a
tunes up.
horrible noise. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. Just one of my favorite horror experiences, just going into that with absolutely no expectations.
Yeah, I just want to thank Noroi because, like we mentioned, last year was kind of a
Yes,
stink fest.
that was.
And
That
we
one
were
saved
we were
it.
pretty much on the stinky train, just going straight into doo-doo town. And like,
You have a way with words.
what can I say? I'm a poet. We come in, right, and I asked Evan, I'm like, so, what are we going to fire up tonight? He's like, I think it's called Noroi the Curse. And, I literally forgot the name of it. We get in there, I'm cracking jokes, and I kind of find myself not laughing anymore. Like, we get 20 minutes in,
That's
I'm
the
like,
best.
I get engaged. But that's the thing, like, I love when you can kind of engage the viewer, right? Like Man said, it's almost like a mystery. So you have this mystery element, and you're trying to solve it, and you're trying to solve the puzzle, and at the same time, you have all these crazy characters, and it's just a fascinating. I don't know, if you just look at it from the distance, it's hard to pinpoint for me exactly what makes that movie so good, but damn, it's brilliant.
For me, it's the issue that you are on the ride with the mystery, but you have no hope in hell of figuring it out.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because it is so weird and
But it
out
just
there.
keeps you engaged.
But it's rooted, despite being
and
so
that's
weird.
the thing. It is weird, but like it does such a good job of just making you accept
Yes.
what's going on. Like,
Absolute suspension of
and
disbelief.
I think that the characters really sell that.
Yeah.
Yep, they're each flawed and they're each very believable. They're very realistic characters, despite the movie itself having sort of if you look at it on paper, it's sort of a silly plot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But while you're watching it, you're not thinking that.
Yeah, like I said, you abandon that thought within minutes, and you just are just gripped.
I think the moment in that movie that worked best for me, or like the first moment, was where like she visits the neighbor or whatever,
Mhm.
and you get that sound.
Yep.
Holy
Oh my
piss!
Yeah.
That shut everybody up.
Yep.
Sound
That was
could not be more
when
important.
It has
was,
a great use of sound, and it doesn't use much sound. It's really
Yeah,
minimal.
yeah, yeah.
But when it does, my God.
Also, we should
profound.
say that it's made in a mockumentary format, and
Yeah.
the reason you take it so seriously off the bat is, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to point that out as a mockumentary if you didn't know going into it you were watching a
it
horror
feels
movie.
real.
It's very
Absolutely.
convincing as a mockumentary, to where if you watch that movie, if you flip to a channel in the middle of the night and just saw it, you might be convinced for a good bit of it that it's a real documentary.
No, I
It does what the
Yeah,
Blair Witch
I
set out to
agree.
do without even
Right.
making a big deal about it.
punch
Right.
him.
I mean, that's how convincing the actors are. That's how convincing the movie is made. Or convincingly, I should say. But it gets
Well-
you engaged from the beginning.
Something that I find interesting about that movie is that, like, you brought up the Blair Witch Project. It's a movie that I feel like the mockumentary style and the found footage style are actually pretty different. Because when you have a mockumentary, it's much easier to accept the idea that these people are filming through these horrible things because they set out to do that, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to establish the
reason.
reason for the
Right.
camera, like Paranormal
Yeah.
Activia.
Activia.
You literally can't.
Paranormal
can't unsee
Activia.
it.
You're just totally dorked up.
Oh, no.
Durr.
No,
All right,
Noroi,
on that
like,
note-
it's just so
Noroi,
good.
great choice. Now that I think about it, I wish it was on my list.
I almost had it on my list. It was
It
close.
was in my contention, but again, Ju-on has like a visceral reaction for me, and despite not liking it more than Nora, I think Nora is a better movie. It's scarier for me. And I wrestled with both of those about giving them a place, but I didn't. I gave them to my favorite ghost movie, which is
Hausu.
Nope. No, we won't have that discussion.
No, we
El
won't.
Orfanato, The Orphanage. Love it.
terrific
excellent
choice.
choice.
That was in my top 5 last year.
It's up there as far as my favorite movies, period. Pretty recent. And the reason I wrestled with it, but eventually had to give it the third slot, is because it's not quite a horror movie. I don't know. It's too happy to be a horror movie, and yet simultaneously so goddamn tragic. But the ambiance, the everything, just spot on. Really good example of why Devin is in love with Spain right now.
doubt.
It's just masterfully directed.
Spain does
and
it the best right now.
It's not anything new, really. It's a spooky house rustling in the night, like ghost movie, but it's done brilliantly. And the characters are so well acted, and you care so deeply about them that it makes the payoff all the more worth it. And the ghost design, simple, wonderful.
I'm not exactly sure what Del Toro's part in this movie was. I'm not
Produced.
He produced it. Usually everything he touches is pretty golden, by the way. There's so many weird ones that you might not have ever heard of. I think like Julia's Eyes is one of them that comes to mind.
I believe it's pronounced Julia.
Julia's Eyes, excuse me. They're all great, and Del Toro had a big part in them. But yeah, that's a movie where I can confidently say also genuinely scared me. All these movies, like obviously, I say I'm desensitized, but we're picking out the best of the best, and this is another one that was really, really scary, and at the same time, beautifully made. This is one that was scary that did not have to sacrifice story or acting in any way.
Very little gore or anything. It's very understated.
Very little, except
for one scene.
May I bring up that scene?
Holy
that
shit!
Was horrifying.
What a jump scare!
I freaked. I jumped. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it in a very vague way, but that scene.
I don't remember what
what show we're talking about.
It's not in the house.
Yeah, it's not in the house. Something.
You can't really say anything without giving away.
Right, well,
It's
I don't
so
remember
good.
it.
But it was something that when it happens, you'll know when it happens. It's one of the few huge jump scares, and it's in broad daylight. If that helps, broad daylight doesn't involve the little kids or the ghosts really.
Yeah.
And it got me jumping out of my seat. I was watching it with my roommate at the time, and we both are like
pants pissingly terrified.
Yeah, we're macho. We're trying to be macho about this movie we're watching together, and then we just both jump.
I'm so glad that you said macho too, because this movie just makes me feel every emotion.
Yeah,
and
you cry at the end. You scream. Lord. You laugh.
This is not a movie to watch if you're not secure in your masculinity and you're like on a date. I've made that mistake. And I wept like a fucking baby in front of a woman.
Just left looking. You're like, "What's wrong?"
No.
Yeah, it's terribly sad.
Under the pillow. She was so scared.
But in that sense, if we're gonna go back to the whole Spanish thing, it's very Spanish. I mean, they take their stories seriously, and they like to end on very sometimes sad but happy type notes. I mean, they just take it so seriously. They're not gonna take away anything from the film. For scares, they want to do a well-rounded, great.
But also,
story.
it hits all the expected beats, for the most part, with the exception of the ending, I think. But it does them really well. I mean, like we had this discussion about The Changeling, which we just watched last night, and is one of my all-time favorites, but it's not on my list. But that has this wonderful like medium scene where they're in a séance, and it's been everybody's done Darius.
That's from
stuff
Insidious,
about
buddy.
It.
They took
yeah,
that from
Insidious just full on jacked it. It's the same scene, but it's like there's a séance scene in the orphanage which is terrifying.
Oh, that's actually what I thought of when I watched The Changing. Was it last night? I remembered all those scenes in the orphanage. I was like, what was that really great?
But you see
sad
nothing.
One?
You see nothing.
Yeah, you don't see anything, man. It's really sad and scary. And I was like, oh, it's the orphanage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example of a scene that's terrifying, great, and weirdly sad.
Yeah,
right.
The whole movie's weirdly sad.
Yeah,
absolutely. If there's one word that you could,
and eventually just not weirdly sad, like understandably
really
sad.
sad. Another thing about that movie, if we're talking about movies that don't shy away from imagery and scares, I mean that's another one where they can just put a frame on something like the kid.
The kid, God,
you know who I'm talking about.
That
and
mask.
They're not shying. They're not jumping. Doing jump scares with him. They're just.
You see him at the end of the hall.
You see him at the end of the hall.
There.
He stands there. You see him at a party. He stands there, and that mask. That I think my roommate wants to dress up as this kid for Halloween, and I'm like, there's no way. Like his body is weird and kiddish. Like,
yeah, he would look really weird in that costume.
You're like gangly, but if somebody could somehow miraculously pull that costume off, wow, that's a scary one.
To wrap it up, a fantastic movie. I revisit it constantly. Totally worth a watch if you haven't seen it, but debatable how much of a horror movie it is.
Yeah, that's part
stuff.
of why it fell out of my top 5 is debatable. But there's no way I would never recommend this to someone. Like if somebody said I want a scary movie, I could recommend it. If somebody said I want a good movie, I could recommend it. It's not the type of movie where I'm gonna only recommend it for specific scenarios. That's a movie like you could ask me any movie you want, unless you said really, really short and shitty. Like, I would say you should
That's a
watch
common request.
Yeah.
You give me the shittiest movie you get.
Very odd request, but no, I mean, it kind of fulfills all facets in horror. So, and yeah, maybe you could call it a thriller or drama or I don't know what.
Drama, I think, is where it falls.
Yeah, but no, I think it's appropriate if somebody asks you for a horror suggestion, that's appropriate.
Yeah, and it's billed as a horror movie too. So,
I mean, it's Del Toro, so.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's The Orphanage.
El Orfanato, all right, Bluester.
I actually want to say something about The Orphanage because I actually
let's
like
go.
that movie.
Sorry.
I might not be as impassioned as you guys, but The Orphanage to me, like when I think of it, it's like almost like a multi-hour encapsulation of like the word, like the phrase, like like darkness or sad. The movie is just so dark, so sad that I think it actually beats you down.
Yeah.
And like there's a certain point in the movie where the reason it's so scary to me, and like I consider it pure horror, or not pure horror, but I think it's very scary.
Yeah,
and the reason that I think it's so scary is that you stop thinking of it as it has effects or it has characters. You just think of it as this. It's almost like the one solid image. It's all so cohesive that you just stop critiquing. You're just along for the ride at that point, and you're just scared out of your damn mind, and you feel so bad while you're watching it. And I think it just
But
brings you down.
as much as it kind of beats you down, and it does, it's unrelentingly sad. It is also really happy, and I have no idea how it manages to do that.
That was a point I wanted to make too, because I don't want to steer people away like if they're going to watch some movie with a Martyrs or the Mist type ending, which is just horrible, just depressing and sad. No spoiler alert, but those. I mean, some of those movies are great. I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm saying this ending is sad, but it's not like a depressing, beat you over the head like we're trying to fuck your life up type sad.
I cry tears of because I cry every time I watch it. Tears of joy at the end,
and a
which
little
is
bit
weird.
of sadness.
It's weird.
It was strange, yeah.
Couple sad tears, couple happy tears.
Yes.
Little mix.
Two on
Mix
each
in
side.
there.
Yeah, I'm not trying to steer people away, but I think that movie's so successful, and I hate to suck on his teeth, but Del Toro just really has this way of kind of capturing a feeling and kind of an ambiance and just putting it in the movie. There's no question like that scene 30 minutes in is going to have the same feel, or 40 minutes. It's really cohesive, and to me that's kind of part of a horror movie. If it isn't cohesive, I fall out.
Yep.
And that movie is great.
Dylan's right. If there's any knock on it at all, it's like, is it a pure horror? That's it. It's so well-rounded, and it's got everything you need.
Yep, it's a gem.
All right, Blue, it's your gem.
All right, so I kind of consider that movie more of a masterpiece than my own number 3.
Oh, I consider it a gym.
But so like kind of going back to my list and what I was trying to accomplish, I was hoping that looking at these 5 movies, you could kind of get a feel for what I look for in movies and kind of have this image of me. And so number 3 is no exception. And I was actually looking at my list, and I was kind of sad that a lot of them were classic movies.
Damn it, I was hoping you'd say Dead Silence.
Hold on. Hold on, man. Dead Silence was in the final stretches.
All right.
But here's the reason I didn't put Dead Silence on is because I try to only include movies that I've seen several times and can truly say I appreciate them.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
with the exception of one movie, and we'll just move on from there.
Yep.
But number 3, I wanted to include something new and something that just absolutely blew me away for just how great it was, and it's Your Next. Like,
man, thank God somebody said it.
of course Your Next is going to be on the list, right? And what's funny is if you just look at the movie, like, I don't know, there's nothing that really pulls away from it to really make me think that the movie's a masterpiece, but the movie was just so well executed, and for me, Your Next just grips you from the beginning, gets you scared without showing you anything, and just...
Oh, yeah, I'd say one of the best 5 openings that I've ever seen.
I don't know why. It was just... For me, it hit a lot of points.
Otherwise, it's just somehow really good.
Yeah.
That I always go back to that. Like, you don't have to push the genre, just do it well. And I think that whoever made this movie, I can't remember who made it.
Adam Wingard.
Adam
Wingard. A turd.
He is, as a person, is. I hope he's not listening right now, right, guys?
Sorry, Adam.
But
Millionth viewer.
As a person, he kind of rubs me in a bratty young. What's the word?
Wannabe auteur.
Prodigy type way, where he like made one or 2 great movies, and now he thinks he's like the fucking definition
Ty West
of horror movie. Him and Ty West.
Speaking of Ty West,
who is in it?
I just
briefly
have to say that I love that Ty West was in the movie. Okay?
Hilarious.
Yeah.
I know of Ty West, but I've never seen him. Right, so I'm watching the movie.
I didn't realize that was
We
him.
have this hilarious character in it, I'm like, man, I really have a feeling that this was written and is played by a director.
I thought that was Manton that brought that up.
Sure enough.
Yeah, I told you. I was on IMDb at the time.
I feel like I called it first, but
I remember
who knows?
somebody for sure. I don't know if it was Manton or you that said like, "Hey guys, I bet this guy is the director of this movie."
I thought it was me, but
I think it was Manton.
Might have been.
But anyway,
I'm gonna put it in my own
Anyway,
mind as
the
me
point
because I'm a
is-
G. But
yeah,
either way,
it was a great
silly.
call anyway. But that was funny.
So anyway, we haven't actually said what this movie is.
Yeah, go ahead, Bluester. Sorry.
I don't want to give away any like
that's the hard part
any
about
spoilers,
this.
but
It's tough.
if we're gonna generalize, it would probably be like a
It's a home
torture
invasion.
porn, home invasion, and like I don't know. There's a lot of twists and turns in the movie that just
One big one.
basically.
Yeah, well, let me just because I've read so many synopses of this.
This is a twist we can give away.
yeah. There's a twist we can give away. It's
Yeah,
certainly
'cause it's how the movie was pitched.
yeah. It's
how it
certainly
was
a home
built.
invasion movie. You can watch the YouTube trailer. And the trailer, by the way, is phenomenal. I saw that maybe years literally.
The
before.
Perfect Day trailer.
Yeah, it's so fun. But it's a home invasion movie, type maybe like slasher homage, where this family gets mercilessly attacked by these freaks, guys outside with animal masks on, and they have no idea why. And the twist that is in the synopsis, and that's not really like a twist or like a spoiler, is that
It's not that far into the movie.
yeah, it's not far in the movie at all. They learn that one of the people in the family or in the house at least has a very bizarre skill in killing and fighting back, basically.
Really
a
skilled.
bizarre skill in killing.
Oh, it's just
He's
a
very
very
adept.
I like that.
unsuspected
No,
skill.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
And this movie, I'm so glad someone brought it up because we could have had a whole podcast on
Yes.
this movie. We all
Oh,
loved it,
God.
but what sucks about this movie is that it does rub certain people the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah.
In particular, I feel like the self-proclaimed the negative side of horror movie buffs, the ones that are pretentious and don't respect this kind of stuff, it tends to rub them the wrong way. And other experts and different people, this movie just, for some reason, as much as I think it's so well-rounded and fun and engaging, entertaining, there's something about it that rubs people the wrong way.
What I think it is, because I've tried to think about this, why people wouldn't
Yeah.
like this movie, and I think it's that it doesn't feel earned. Like, it just clicks for some reason.
Yeah, I
The
know
movie's
it is. It's
not
magical.
particularly well put together. It's not completely expertly paced. There's a couple of weird missteps
There's
in
some
it
big ridiculous missteps that don't make sense.
that don't make sense, yeah. And some weird directorial choices, but it all works.
To that point, I think that when you're watching it, you're going to realize that you don't really care about those missteps because it's so
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the movie is something you can watch over and over.
I've seen it
that's
like 5
true.
times.
It's fun to watch.
And let me say that we're giving it some of the bad, we're saying pointing some of the bad things out, the flaws, but just to like play devil's advocate. But it is actually pretty geniusly shot and
Yeah.
made, and like Adam Wingard did it in a very genius style. I mean, it's shot like a multi-million-dollar movie. It's
It
produced,
doesn't show its budget at all.
it's produced like it was made, to be a blockbuster hit. It looks like a huge, like #1 movie type hit.
Huge number one.
I don't know what I was
Big
going for
old
there,
movie.
but it
One of the
certainly
things-
doesn't give you the vibe of an indie horror, if you ask me. And if
Yeah.
it does at all, it's through some of the acting, and that's
Yes,
it.
yeah.
But
It's steps heads and shoulders above its peers, above
it's
of
insane.
any other movie that tries to do what it does.
Yeah, if you
I
watch
think.
it.
I mean, its closest analog is The Strangers. It's
Mm.
it's a
I almost think it's like a parody of The
yeah.
Strangers.
Well, it's
For sure.
it's a more fun loving version of The Strangers, because The Strangers is just a world ruining movie.
It's very miserable. It takes itself really seriously.
hurts
it's good.
to
It's scary
watch.
for sure. And I heard some people try to compare the two and say, "Oh, it's not even close to The Strangers."
But it
Well,
doesn't
they're
attempt to.
different
Can't
movies.
compare
Yeah,
them.
they're
Not even close.
Yeah, it is not even close because they're different movies.
Yeah.
This one is made in a very, very slightly self-referential style, to where it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not to where
Not to the
it's
level of
embarrassing
Scream or
itself.
something.
Yeah,
It's,
it has some legitimate scares in it, and it's made as an homage, I still think, at two classic home invasion slasher type movies.
well, it rapidly replaced like Scream as my top meta horror movie.
I agree. I 100% agree. And another thing that rubbed people the wrong way, especially some horror movie buffs, which this kills me, is they don't get it, or I don't know what it is. Maybe they do get it. They get so freaked out that there's not enough gore. That in one of the scenes that
It's so gory.
There are
so violent. Is
there
that
are-
an actual concern?
There are, but people go into that movie expecting to see like some hostile shit. And one scene that kills me again. Let me get back to the point that they refer to specifically is they're like the scene where he lifts the machete up and they don't even show it go through the guy. They just show the blood on the wall. I'm like, that was crafted on purpose. It was the very first scene.
Also, so
Yeah.
many movies do
Yeah,
that.
and
How's that an
it was
issue?
made in the first and for the first scene to kind of put you in this zone and this mentality, like,
primes you.
oh, this is gonna be like a fun, like a slasher homage type thing. They did that to kind of as a wink or a shout out to like, hey,
It's also just it's funny. It's a
It is. It's funny.
Yeah,
a really
it's got some good
really
lines.
entertaining movie.
people refer to the scenes where they're arguing when they're getting attacked about who's faster, and they're
So
like, that's
funny.
so stupid. And I'm like, no, it's supposed to be a little bit funny.
It's
And-
kind of played for laughs.
Yeah.
I
A
think.
little bit.
But it's played for laughs, and yet you kind of can't laugh because it's so intense.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's a point where you're like kind of want to laugh, but I've watched it in very, very many settings where most people don't laugh. They're kind of like, huh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
funny. And I think it's great because you're in a very terrifying
Depending
situation.
on the way that you want to watch the movie, it is that movie.
Yeah.
It's either a horror comedy, it's either a meta, narrative. I don't
Meta world
I'm
piece.
talking on my own ass, or it's just a straight up home invasion slasher, and it works either way.
I think it works on all accounts, but for whatever reason, I wish we could deconstruct this more. It really does rub people the wrong way, where I could see most people give it a very positive review, and then there's a few that don't just say, oh, it didn't do it for me. They're like, that is one of the worst movies I've seen this year, which I think is a tall tale sign or whatever that something rubs somebody the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah.
When they go overboard on their like poor review
When
of
you
a
go
movie.
that far into hyperbole, it's like, okay,
We
that's-
get it. Like and I think part of it is the director. I think people get upset that this young gun comes out and makes this movie.
It's kind of upsetting to me
For me too. And he's like, I know horror. That's me. I'm only 29, but I know the genre.
because in general I would write him off, but then he makes this movie, and I'm like, damn, okay,
It's-
But if you actually look at the movie and you look at the director, I think it's his cockiness.
that helps.
I obviously
yeah.
don't
It
know the
might-
director,
yeah.
but I think it's his confidence that actually shows
It-
through in
it
the
comes
movie,
through
right?
in-
I was
It's
gonna say
a
it
cocky
bleeds through
movie.
the movie. That's
He
exactly
pulls these
what I was
elements
gonna say.
together like you wouldn't believe. It's so seamless to me that I don't even really consider it a deconstruction or a Strangers. If it's anything like a Stranger, it's basically like the jock that's just showing him how it's done.
Yeah.
Like,
It's just a similar
this shit's
genre.
easy,
I think
kid. I
that's-
just made this movie.
That's really good, Blutz. I think that's the reason that people don't like it. It feels like the jock showing off.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
the people who review it negatively are the people who want to make that movie, and that somebody
I
beat
agree.
them to
Those
it.
guys
They're like,
do it.
damn it.
I think this guy struck gold, and you can. And the best part is, it's not accidental. I'm telling you right
No.
now, the way that
It
movie
was
was
so
made, it
good.
was so deliberate. And tell me I'm wrong, but there's so many sound cues that I've never heard before.
I just want to
that were
piggyback off
horrifying.
that, Devin. Like, we could go on about this all night, but one of the things one of the reasons I chose this movie, and I have to point to Drive because that Drive basically made me appreciate soundtracks more. But like, I've never seen a movie, especially a horror movie, that played so centrally to sound effects and like music specifically. Like they use music.
I've been looking for the magic.
Exactly. Like it's actually, if I actually look at it in like a spectrum, it's actually strange how many different musical cues there are.
Yeah.
You have ones that are basically telling you, yeah, you can laugh at this now. You have ones that are
Yeah.
intended to get your heart racing, get you pumped up. You have ones that are
Ones that
setting
are-
you up to have fun with the scene or
and-
just scare the shit out
ones
of
that are
you.
very nostalgic to older movies. I think,
It's
too.
basically
If,
80s.
if you know what, you'll know what I'm talking about. I mean, there's a scene where the music transitions so greatly and sharply, where from like this spookiness to like this. I
think that's exactly it,
I'm
actually.
getting tingly.
Oh, I know it.
Yeah,
Just hearing
it
your
is- that- it was so
rendition of
good.
it.
It's such a great oh, that's right. We're watching like a home
It's not afraid
invasion.
to remind you that it's a movie.
Yeah, for sure, and it does it well.
The
And the
movie's
sta-
just so fun.
the sound-
Let's just stop the podcast and just watch that movie.
Yeah,
All
right.
right, guys, we'll
We
see
could.
you guys.
Let's
See,
do it.
Honestly, we do need to move on from it though, because we literally could talk about this one
Yeah,
all
yeah,
night.
it's great.
But I just wanted to say that was one of the main reasons I brought it because I think the music is a star of the movie, kind of to say, and I think that it just absolutely elevates it beyond anything. So that's my number 3.
Excellent choice.
I'm a little nervous to say it, but I think it's one of the best movies in the 21st century. One of the best horror movies in the 21st century.
I'll give that to you.
And the only reason
last,
I'm-
There's no problem.
and-
last 10 years at least.
And the only reason I'm nervous is because of those vehement haters of it. Like that's the only reason. But I get what they're I get they
Get a
don't like
good
it.
crowd with this one.
Yeah, it's
You can
good.
have fun.
Get a good crowd.
All right, well,
So Dev Daddy, what do you got for us?
Number
two.
2.
Daddy Dev.
I'm shocked
Daddy,
that one
Daddy,
didn't make
Dev,
my
Dev.
top 5. It's just so good.
I got you covered, buddy.
Thank you. I'm glad
Yeah,
you did.
I'm glad you did.
This will be number 2. Number 2. Holy shit.
Yeah.
This will be an easy one to talk about. This is the movie that terrified me when I watched it as a kid. That ruined part of my childhood, and holds up well today when I rewatch it. Maybe the
Chitty
most,
Chitty
in
Bang
my
Bang?
opinion, one of the most well-rounded, just pure horror movies ever made, and that's just the John Carpenter's Halloween. Sorry, Rob Zombie. I meant to say Rob Zombie. No, I'm
You're
just kidding.
so serious that I actually believed you. I kind of did a double take at your face. I was like,
No.
this guy is fucking
1978, John Carpenter's Halloween. It holds up today and scares and everything. It's
What
like
a good ass movie.
it's a
I
solid
seem to
flick.
concur. I saw that on a couple 100 lists, so
What's
I know
a-
what you're talking about.
What's funny about this one is we talked for so long and in depth about Your Next in a way, and I feel like this is one that won't take much
Nope.
talking.
There's no introduction.
Not a
man.
lot
I
to
mean,
say.
we all know exactly what it is. We know what it delivers.
Odds are anybody
horror
listening to
movie
this has
fans
seen it.
listening. Let me explain to you this movie Halloween.
seen
No spoilers, please.
No, it's just it was made in an amazing pinnacle time for the horror movie genre. 78, late 70s, which might be actually towards the end, almost the early 80s. It kind of gets borderline, but and it was made to be, I think, like the perfect and symbol of a slasher movie. It wasn't the first. We've heard all
Black
kinds
Christmas.
of yeah. Black Christmas
Still
is,
need to
is
see
like
that.
credited
Love it.
to be one of the first, but there's so many others before that could be credited. I mean, Psycho.
Yeah.
But I think this movie is the quintessential slasher movie. I think it is the best you could have done, I guess, at that time.
It strikes me every time I revisit it just how low key it is.
I was just about to say that.
Oh, very subtle.
It's very
It's
simple. I mean,
Greatly subtle.
There's not. I mean, like even the kills are not. But
No.
that's what makes it so effective. It's like I love Friday the 13th, but it's so over the top, and Halloween feels a little nerve wracking because it feels really real.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that
agree.
you've got this hulking, deformed weirdo with a William Shatner mask,
Yeah.
it feels real.
It is real, yeah, for sure.
and the sense of desperation. Oh my god! Like you identify with. There's a reason that she's the strongest final girl, is because you just straight up identify with her plight. Like she is in the shit.
Another great thing about it is how he's introduced from the beginning of the movie, and then he's just there throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
It's not like he comes in the middle or at the end. This dude
Nope.
is in the movie the entire movie.
Great pacing.
Yeah.
Great
Absolutely.
pacing.
I think those initial scenes, I always harp on pacing and just getting engaged, but those initial scenes set your character up, set the whole timeline in play, and I think that
Yeah.
it just absolutely was just brilliant.
Some of those scenes, when you think about them now, like the one that comes to a lot of people's minds that doesn't even really involve Michael Myers is like the insane asylum scene
Yeah.
outside.
Great scene.
It's just so dreadful and chilling, and
It also just kind of feels miserable and real.
yeah, it's again dreadful. Dread, I think, is a great word to use for that. It's hard to watch sometimes. And another thing I love about this, in the same vein of talking about movies that sometimes sacrifice big budgets and stuff or acting or whatever for just a pure horror scary movie. And I'm not saying by any means the acting was bad, but these weren't big time actors in this movie. They weren't blockbuster actors. Jamie Lee Curtis, I mean, that was her first movie, right? And I don't know who's Donald. Is it Donald Pleasance?
Glover.
Yes.
Donald Pleasance. He's good, but I mean, he's not the best actor.
Well, he's also just not a big.
Well,
role.
something to consider though is that this was an independent movie.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like there
It's the
was
dream.
no. Now it's this huge franchise, but
It's
I mean,
hilarious to think about.
That's what bugs me when people kind of knock on movies that I think are scary and fun and engaging and ultimately kind of well-rounded, but they get on it because the acting may not be all the way there, or the plot may be a little bit silly or dumb. This Halloween movie, when it first came out, was not it wasn't the Ben-Hur of its day. I mean, it was just a
Ben-Hur
horror
sucks.
movie.
I just want to say,
The movie sucks. Why would you bring that?
Sorry.
going off of what both of you said, I think that one of the strong points of the movie is even if we don't consider that the movie was low budget or kind of small fry at the time, just working with what you have, right? Like
They did it
They acknowledge
masterfully.
they don't have gallons of blood to throw around.
Yep.
And I think that actually worked to their advantage so much. It's almost a
constraint.
joke.
Yeah.
Because like
The
Dylan was
William
saying-
Shatner mask.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's an absolute joke. But just like working with what you have, right? I feel like a lot of scenes that might have otherwise been very gory are very minimal, and I think that leaves so much to your imagination that you could put yourself in those situations, and you get so scared just thinking that shit could have happened to me.
The one that comes to mind is the where he's impersonating the person.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
so
Dear
bizarre.
God,
That is
scene
horrifying.
Something interesting about what Brant was just saying was that like that movie has this different mentality where the killer doesn't really want to maim you. He doesn't really want to tear you to
Just
shreds.
wants to get
He just
rid
wants
of
to
you.
stab you, get you killed, and get rid of you.
Yeah, you're
And
done.
There's
it's
actually
a very different.
which is
Yeah.
ironic because like that movie I feel like spawned kind of the stalk
Well,
where
yeah.
he's just walking slow.
Yeah,
pace.
that was
It's
definitely one of the.
spawned- I mean, it spawned Friday the 13th, which is its opposite. The Friday the 13th is about how can we creatively, weirdly kill all these people
Yeah,
and just make it campy and shit. And I love it for that, but it's not effective.
but to Bluch's
Exactly.
point, yeah, I think it was one of the first to do like the slow walk, like I'm just gonna walk normally like
creepster.
a freak show, and then when I catch up to you, which I inevitably will, I'm gonna kill you.
kind
which is
of
scarier than a dude running after you. It was at the time at least.
I completely agree.
And another thing about his personality, or Michael Myers, that is, or I guess lack thereof, is
You
that
mean Mike Myers,
sorry.
Love Guru.
Are we going back to the Love Gurus? But Michael
would love to go
Michael
back to
Myers as a killer was a great new. I think there was a new thing one of the great things about him is that you can't reason with this dude.
No.
He's might as
He's
well
a
just
tank.
yeah.
He's
be
just
a
going to kill you
monster.
the second he reaches
He doesn't
you. There's
speak,
no ifs,
he
ands,
doesn't
or
listen
buts.
to
And he
your-
will do it.
Yeah, he doesn't listen. He's not trying to torment you and like torture you and like listen to you scream. He's just a freak that cannot be reasoned with. You cannot,
Exactly.
as a viewer, you cannot sympathize with him at all.
Exactly. It's
Um,
kind of one of those things like it's ultimate fear.
A big misstep in like the later Halloween movies, they try and have you empathize with him.
Oh,
Well,
like
yeah.
the Rob Zombie
and it
ones.
just
Yeah.
no.
I mean, it's like the Pinhead thing and the
Yeah.
Jason thing. It's like they realize these characters are popular. They make cool costumes.
Exactly,
And there
yeah.
you go.
That's it.
It's-
Actually, now that I think about it, Halloween might be my favorite opening scene. I usually say
Well,
Scream. I
something-
usually default to Scream, but
Something
my
I really wanna-
God, that
I'm embarrassed.
opening.
I've seen this movie like 10 times. Can you remind me?
Him as a kid.
Oh yeah, of course.
Something
Holy,
I-
So
That's
spooky.
a monumental one. Yeah.
holy shit!
A big part of why that movie is so good, and this kind of actually goes back to the working with what you have. John Carpenter did the music for that movie,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't know that.
I
Like,
did know that. That's amazing.
He created that
Brilliant.
iconic score. Yeah, and people know that without even seeing the movie. Like that music is ingrained in people's brains. That's what they think of when they think of a horror.
And it's-
Again, music is important.
Simplicity of it too is great, and I think that Jaws is the same kind of thing. That kind of theme is so well known and iconic, but it's just the most simple, spooky thing.
One last thing I wanted to say, kind of going back to the minimalism and the kind of reality of it all is that, and I hate to even relate it to this, but if you actually happen upon actual videos of people being stabbed and stuff, it's really horrifying. But like,
How did you just?
Wow.
dude, the fucking internet's awful, dude. What I'm saying is
the internet.
that
is awful.
movie. Okay,
Oh
I
my-
should not have referenced that,
We'll
but
keep going.
the reason I bring it up is because I feel like that movie kind of is very realistic in that sense. It's not dramatic. It's not prolonged. These people aren't like going on for 20 minutes about it. It's not silly. It's just this dude is just a killer, and he's just gonna murder you with a couple stab wounds, and you're done.
But-
And they don't play it up at all.
But they're excruciating.
know.
You're right. I mean, it feels like you're getting stabbed.
And actually, a lot of it's not even stab wounds. He does a lot of stranglings too.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to make. It's just it's so realistic. It's almost strange because the movie was it's so minimal. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one that you can safely call, anybody can safely call a masterpiece.
Yep.
It's great. But
Manton?
Manton,
Numero
number 2, right?
dos.
we are at number 2 for Mantron.
Okay, so I know this one is on other people's list, and I almost feel bad about saying it because I hate to kill the conversation. Yeah.
What? What?
Oh, I think we're about to have a
Yeah.
trifecta here.
Yeah, I think this is all three of our number 2. But go ahead.
no,
No,
way.
because he just did his number 2, right? Halloween.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think that your number 2 is probably
Might be
ours
some of
as
your
well.
number ones or something.
I think it
Anyway.
might be our number 2.
Oh.
Okay, well then that'll make things a lot faster. Yeah, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Ooh, boy.
Now-
Okay, we just killed 3 birds with
Oh my
one
God.
stone. That's mine and it's Blutster's.
Okay, and just
Your
to let
birds.
everybody know,
We're birds.
we
My
decided
party.
We're
we
birds.
decided these lists without talking to each other. So that's kind of funny that it was number 2 on 3 of our lists.
Yeah.
Because
It is securely
That'd
at
be my
number
honorable
2.
mention for sure too.
God, what a good movie.
yeah, I think that like just starting up the movie, you know that you're in for some fear because that opening scene with and then you're seeing the
good.
the photographs and you're seeing the that grotesque statue, whatever you want to call it.
The
Yep.
death statue,
yep.
yeah.
And it's a really good example of why sort of a gritty look to your movie
Yes.
and like a grainy film look can be very, very beneficial
And
to a horror movie.
The reason why the remakes don't work. They're
yeah,
too
they do
clean.
look very clean.
Too clean.
They also
Not
give
cool.
Leatherface like a personality and
Yeah.
feelings. It's horrible.
Well, that's another thing that kind of is similar to
though.
Halloween.
Michael Myers,
yeah.
yeah.
I think he is a character in him. of
He is a
himself.
character.
Well, he
the whole
he is,
family is.
One of the best parts about
He's
that
almost like
movie,
a tool, though.
and this comes out a lot, is that like, you know, it's a movie that people constantly refer to as being like gory and bloody, and it's
None.
not. There's no gore, no blood, maybe a tiny little blood, but I don't
Well,
think
the,
there's really
the
any.
first scene where he cuts himself or whatever, but
Sure, but that's hardly. I mean, that
Is there
barely
really
counts.
not blood?
no,
when-
it
there
is
really is not. And that's-
incredible, but
and that's
there's
what's-
none.
That's the.
it's violent though.
That's
It's really
the-
violent.
Well, it's violent because you.
It's implied.
It's mostly implied, and like,
Imagination does the terror for
Yeah.
you.
yep,
Yeah,
you see Leatherface, you see this guy's face, you see him wearing some.
They don't tell you that it's human skin.
Sure,
you figure that
you're
out.
looking at it and you're like, that might be somebody else's face on his face
Yes.
right now, and
Someone else's face on his face.
It is to
And,
me. Oh, sorry, go ahead. man.
it's like that first scene when you see him,
Yeah.
and he attacks one of the kids.
Out of
There's
nowhere.
there's no fanfare to it. There's no
Out of
Yeah.
nowhere.
like hits the
Just a
dude,
mallet in the head or
ruthlessly.
something.
and it's
right?
like it's a mallet to the head. All you hear is this horrific, "Toop,"
yeah.
and he hits the floor,
And
he starts
twitches.
spasming, and he gets dragged away, and you don't get to see what happens to him or anything, but you know.
This
You
this
know what's
movie
going on.
to me is very much in the same vein of Notoroy, where it's just too real.
Exactly.
It
It's
is very
for a
realistic,
movie
yeah.
as absurd as it is.
Exactly.
It is so real.
It's also I've been harping on this relentless, and
Yes.
it's almost like a nightmare where you.
It is a nightmare.
Where
That
you
is
think
how I
you're out of the
classify the movie.
nightmare,
just
and then
never
you're just
wake
in
up from
another
it.
nightmare,
Yeah.
right? Like there's points where you're like, oh, thank God, we're
Maybe it'll
finally
let
gonna
up.
get out of it, and then you're like,
and then it gets scarier.
it gets scarier. And you know what I'm talking about when you have nightmares and you think you wake up and it's just still another nightmare. You know,
That's this whole movie.
It's-
that's what this movie is. Yeah.
Why? I mean, and I wrestle usually with what is the scariest movie I've ever seen, and I usually say Ju-on because it's the only one to keep me up. But this one may be the scariest simply because it is just nonstop, and you halfway can't believe what you're seeing.
And it just keeps going.
Yeah, it feels like a fever dream. It's just
It
whoa,
is. It's
God.
very
think
much
that's
like
such a
a
good
fucked up
analogy.
fever dream.
It just gives you this like gut churning sensation through the whole thing.
So something that I wanted to bring up is that like, and I'm interested to hear Brandon's side of this, but Brandon saw that movie for his first time
Yes.
last year.
Yeah.
I was
So-
going to bring that up.
So what I wanted
Best
to
first reaction.
So what I wanted to say about it was like just to kind of give you guys background. We projected that movie, Texas Chainsaw and Halloween, onto the side of Devin's apartment. One of the most amazing like Halloween experiences
Good
I've ever
setup.
had.
So perfect.
fun.
There was just creepy people walking around the
whole
the
thing
A
was
apartment.
couple people
creepy
joined
as
us
hell.
at one point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some
was
random
weird.
people came and watched
After
it.
we peed on that guy's
Uh,
window, he
Yeah, we
joined
did
us.
pee on his window.
Anyways, it was cool, but it was really interesting to see because Brandon had this movie talked up to him his whole life,
Exactly.
and it was so interesting to see him like kind of look over at him and watch him watching this movie.
Yeah, it was
just completely silent, which is some sort
It's
of
the best.
uncharacteristic.
it was like baby's first movie.
Yeah.
And he
Oh
was
my
just
God.
I mean that in the most
Oh my god.
I mean that in the most respectful way. Like it
And-
was wonderful to see.
And something about Brandon is that like he tends to be very critical about movies, especially right after we watch them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
I do.
immediately after it was over, all of us just looked over at Brandon and we were like, "So, what do you think, buddy?" And
He
what
was
did you
enamored.
say?
I just want to talk through that. So everything that these guys just said is totally true. I can be a total dick about my movies, and one of the things I wanted to highlight about this movie is that I've literally seen remakes of this movie. I've seen scenes from this movie. Everyone's talked about it. It's like a joke now. This is one of those movies that gets ruined for you after the fact, i.e. Exorcist. But I'm not joking when I said I went into this movie. I was absolutely fucking hooked from the second it started.
Yes.
And when I didn't even know these guys were looking at me because I was watching the movie without pulling my gaze away for a second. And I'm not joking. When it ended, I stood up and was fucking yelling because this movie was it was
great
because it finally ended. The movie was so insane.
I'm pretty sure that like it was dead silent. You stood up and you just like looked around at all of us and you just said, "Oh my god!"
I was screaming at the top of my lungs because like. Oh my god!
He dressed up as Leatherface like the next week for
the next
Halloween.
week. The next week was
I was
Halloween.
already sold on the.
He was already
juice.
Leatherface.
But no, like that movie, I don't know. I don't know how I can pinpoint what it is, but I don't know if it's acting or what. But like Leatherface, the character, the actor, etc., like just sold me and scared me so much that the whole ending scene where he's just spinning around wildly, like
One of the
I
best
thought this
last
wasn't-
shots in a horror movie. history.
Absolutely, no question. I thought it was actually just real. So
Utterly,
scary.
utterly inhuman.
Absolutely.
I mean, God.
He just captured it so well. Like it freaked me out until like literally the girl's getting away. You know, like it's a happy ending, but I was so
Spoilers.
terrified. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. This movie is a classic. But either way, like up until the end, like the movie terrified me and horrified me and had me on edge. And when it ended, I just stood up and just yelled because it was just so freaking crazy.
Let me interject and say that watching a movie with Brewster is great when you've seen it and he hasn't, and you know he's enjoying it because he doesn't hide it. It's he's so vocal. Like after a great scene, he'll be quiet like as hell for 15 minutes, and then at the end of a great scene, he'll just be like, "Oh my god!" And I can just
that was me during the entire movie of Dead Silence.
Yeah,
I could not believe what I was watching.
He loved Dead Silence, and he kept looking at me and looking at me at the eyes and just being like, "What?"
I just wanted to see your
And it was-
reaction. I was like, everyone has to think the same thing as me.
Wait, are we watching the same movie?
Yeah.
That's what it was like during the Roy too, though. There was so many times, and it was all of us as a group. We
I
kept
wasn't
looking
there.
at-
I wasn't there the first time. I got to see
Oh,
it
yeah,
after you
that's
guys
right.
gave me the.
Well,
Sorry.
there was
good
the
review.
three of us plus like 3 or 4 other people, and we just constantly would look around at each other and just be like, "Are you seeing this?"
Yeah.
Like,
And of course, everyone was mouth agape, just staring.
Yeah,
at
but like on the
screen.
note of Notoroy, it was like the same way that he reacted by dressing as Leatherface the next week. Like you guys saw it, and I hadn't seen it that
We had
day,
to
and then
show
you
you.
immediately showed me the next day.
We had to
you
show you.
rewatched
Gotta
it
watch it.
immediately.
I
and
think you were next. We had a similar experience like that.
yeah,
There's
we were
just
all there
certain
for
movies
that.
you have
We
to share.
literally were all chanting blend him or blend his braids.
Oh, my
Spoilers.
God.
that was it.
You'll know what
No,
scene
no.
we're talking about.
When she goes to plug in the
yeah.
blender, we were like, "Plug it in!"
Oh, yeah.
plug it in.
and then
That
she
movie just
did,
gets
and,
you pumped.
and then we
Yeah,
all
it
just
was-
broke into
We
celebration.
were just cheering.
We were in that. That was all
So
of our
good.
first viewing, and we all got into it.
So good.
All right, now we're talking about You're Next again, and
Yeah, let's go.
we
Let's
can't help
Anywho,
it.
on the note of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's 3 people who agreed that it's number 2. If you haven't seen it, my God, please.
Yeah,
It would be number 1 on my list if there wasn't
Yes,
a literally perfect
yeah.
movie in front of it.
And
I'm
to-
sorry.
exactly the same.
And to its credit, I made a top 10 list last year, and that was in my top 10. It was so close to being my top 5, but it doesn't strike me as nostalgically as most people. But otherwise, it's a masterpiece as well.
So on that note, what is your number 1?
Oh man, this is gonna be a strange one. I feel like you guys, some of you have a good idea,
I
but
think so.
it is a 1990
Whoa.
movie that threw me for a loop. It caught me so
Oh,
off
yeah.
guard. It's about urban legends. It's Candyman.
What?
Hang on,
Number
guys.
one?
Guys, for the purposes of the podcast, we cannot say this more than 5 times.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, more than 4. Or we're dead.
But yeah, let me.
Everybody who
that
listens to
personally.
it is then dead as well, and that's a good. That's
Yeah,
a
let me
so
give you
guys,
some
you
reasons.
might want to stop
good
listening.
thing no one's listening.
And
Ooh.
I've watched this multiple times, and there's so many reasons I love this movie to death. One is that it came out in a time period that I still was able to enjoy, and even for its time period, it was 1990, I think. It was pretty early. It was so unrestrained for even being technically a 90s movie. And I'll give you some examples. I mean, there's just like part of this urban legend of Candyman. There's a scene where they, like, of course, they refer in the movie this kid as a retard. I mean, he's a mentally retarded kid. Candyman, urban legend, apparently cuts this retarded kid's penis off.
It's
It's
unbelievably
ridiculous.
I will never forget watching that.
It
scene
doesn't
for the
show
first
it to you,
time.
but
It
you're
didn't
just like,
show
did
it,
they
but
just do that?
I'm like, really? And let me backtrack a little bit and tell you that another reason I love this movie, it's made to be 100% serious. Like, it was made to be a blockbuster masterpiece, and they do it well. So when this was part of the movie, it wasn't something you laughed at unless you kind of think about it. You're like, what? And there's another scene, like there's like babies that get murdered by this thing, or
It's
It's gruesome.
Yeah.
dog decapitations. I mean, there's things that you wouldn't expect from a movie that early, even by today's standards. And I mean, if you guys want to chime in there, but I have more points I want to hit on it.
What's interesting about it to me is that it's Craven, right?
No, I think it's Clive.
Clive Barker?
Barker?
No, I think it's Craven. Regardless,
Craven.
it's a white dude, but it's a movie made by a white dude that is surprisingly really astute as far as like class issues go and things like that. There's a lot going on in the movie. It's not just a horror movie.
Well, let me go in there. Sorry, I was thinking of something else, but yeah, exactly. That movie. Another reason I love that movie. It's made with so many themes in mind, just themes of like urban legends, themes of race, really, really serious themes. I mean, at the end, I mean, you see this white woman and this killer black man who is Candyman. He's a black actor. I wish I knew his name.
Tony Todd.
Yes, and there's like this awkward like
Spoilers.
love-hate thing that. So it's like it brings in like interracial relationship type themes, and there's just themes of sex, there's themes of poverty, and they just bring in some serious, really deep, provocative themes. And you know what? I'll stoop to this level. I'll quote Roger Ebert. This is a movie, and if you know Roger Ebert, well,
Does
you
not
know
particularly care
he's
for horror.
not into horror that well. But
Sorry.
he reviewed he reviewed this movie quite well. I think it was 3 or 3.5 stars out of 4, and he had some very deep quotes in it. And one of them that was just a very brief and hard hitting was just like, this movie scares you. This movie scared me with its story, not with its I can't.
I mean, I'd argue that
I mean.
most of the scares in the movie not really.
Yeah,
all that
it's
scary.
not the scariest movie you'll ever see, but there's certainly some hard hitting moments that are kind of jump scares and stuff that you would not expect. And
Yeah,
that's
you can't go into that movie expecting anything.
Really.
It's a really off the wall movie. One of the things I'd say that makes it scary is that, like Devin was saying, there's so much depth and interest in the movie that you're actually kind of engaged almost on just like a storytelling perspective. Yeah. And then it's just like, don't forget, this movie's actually pretty damn scary, and they spook you real quick.
Yeah, there's a scene, if you guys, I don't know how recently you watched it. Me and Manton watched this together. There's a scene with a psychiatrist where they're where everybody at that point, including the audience,
Oh God, I forgot about that.
is starting to assume that she's crazy because she's talking about this Candyman stuff. And there's just stuff that happens during that scene that you're just like, whoa. Like, I was like, that. For being a 90s movie, I felt like I would be able to predict most things that are going to happen, but this is insane. So that's a scene to think about. And a point I wanted to hit on about how seriously this movie was made, how it wasn't made in any way like a tongue-in-cheek movie or a B movie. Philip Glass does the soundtrack.
Such a good score.
And it's such an amazing soundtrack. Philip Glass is a guy, if you don't know, who's done, I want to say, hundreds
classical composer
of
Didn't
scores.
they trick him into doing this movie?
Yeah,
Essentially,
let
they did.
me go on. That's why it's hilarious. He's done I don't know, I assume over 100 or hundreds of scores, but he's done amazing ones like The Truman Show. He's a beautiful classical composer. But what's hilarious is that the creators of this movie. Did you figure out the director, by the way?
It's like Bernard Rose.
Okay,
But the writer, Clive Barker, did do
Barker
some
wrote
writing.
it. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, the director and the creator of this movie clearly wanted to make it seriously to the extent that they apparently tricked Philip Glass into doing the soundtrack, who's not, of course, not known to do horror movies or whatever. They apparently sold this movie to him as being like this psychological drama type movie, and they kind of like left out the fact that it's a horror movie, like it's a straight up horror movie. So they did that to the point to well enough to get him to do this amazing, beautiful soundtrack, which makes the movies so well. But they get him to do this, And it wasn't until after the movie actually finally was made, I guess, till it came out that
he was pissed.
he was pissed
yeah.
off. He was like, "You tricked me."
I think he tried to like sue them out of it or something. Like
Yeah.
he didn't want that movie to be released with his soundtrack.
Because this
or
guy's
his
a
score.
legit serious composer. He
Yeah.
doesn't want it to be like associated with a fucking slasher movie, a horror movie.
He was
I'm
ashamed
glad they
of
duped
it.
him.
But
It's
God,
beautiful.
did he get associated with a good one?
Oh,
I mean, hell,
it's a
he,
solid one.
he could have been attached to Friday the 13th. Jason Goes to Hell. Like,
Yeah.
but no.
So let me give you one last disclaimer on it. Don't watch this movie to be purely scared.
No.
Watch this movie if you want to see a great
Which-
storytelling is a great word to use. It's a great story.
It strikes me as strange though, because Devin, it's so not up your alley.
It's very
Yeah,
odd.
that's
You know he loves
shocking.
that.
I know
I-
that you love it, but
I got
it's,
Insidious and up here and like one missed call.
It's
Yeah,
it
those
goes
I
against
get.
most of what you look for in a horror movie.
Yeah,
actually.
this one, something about the
It's good.
soundtrack
It's a really
clicks
good
with
movie.
the acting, clicks with the story, clicks with the themes.
That was one of the things.
It's
you
a
brought
beautiful
up
movie.
Before I ever saw the soundtrack, you just prepped me, and even though my expectations were high, it totally delivered.
Good.
But I just have to say, Devin, like your list, I was a little surprised. Like,
I thought Kill List was going to be on your
Yeah,
list.
where is
I
that?
And I
mentioned
wanted
you,
to argue.
I mentioned you saying, no, I kind of realized what you were referring to earlier.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, he thinks I'm going to say Kill List. Kill List is not on there the same reason The Orphanage isn't, is because it's not pure horror enough for me to put it on there. But I love Kill List.
Good movie. We've got issues.
We
but-
can talk about it.
Devin just
another
wanted to
time.
avoid the controversy.
Wow.
Anywho, Manton, you're number
Putting them
one.
on blast.
You're next. I'm
So
gonna kill you.
so my number 2 has already been said. Or I'm sorry, we're on number one.
One.
My number 1 has already been said. It was Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Good.
Forgot about
Yeah,
I know
it's
that- I
hard
know
for
that
me
you
not
love
to
that
put it
movie.
as my number 1
Yeah.
because that movie sort of got me interested not only in horror but film in general. Like, I had obviously enjoyed plenty of horror movies up until that one, but there was something about that movie that got me interested in like what was the process behind making this movie, and
It's all
why
pretty visible on
right
on that movie.
right.
Yeah.
and that might be
Thanks,
part
Dave.
of it. That might be part of it. Like, it kind of made me wonder what was their intention with this movie, and like, how did this movie end up being as good as it is? Because I do think that it was sort of a happy accident.
Yeah. For sure.
From what I've heard about that movie, they didn't know what they were doing. They kind of just said, "Let's make this movie." I guess we've already kind of gone over a lot of it, but you can just see from the opening scenes. There's one scene in that movie that I'll always remember. The scene where they're driving up to the cabin.
Yes. God, I love
And
that.
all the sound cuts out except for what you end up seeing is the sound of the it's the sound
Bridge or
of a
whatever.
bench hitting
Bench, yeah.
Oh,
hitting
yeah,
the-
yeah.
a porch bench hitting the side of the house, but you don't know that, and you're just hearing this little clack every couple seconds, and you're watching them drive up to this cabin.
Fantastic.
And it's
opening.
like so haunting. It's so haunting.
Well, it'd be unfair to not discuss this one since it's your number one because there's so much more we can discuss on it. We might as well. For me, I mean, that scene's terrific. The first scene that really gets me, for some reason, it's something about the sound. First off, the sound design and the music in this is so
Yeah.
unnerving. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But one of the first ones is where that girl is kind of writing in her little diary or whether, I don't know what she's doing, drawing something. And then it's like her hand, like spoiler, I guess, but her hand gets kind of taken over by some entity, and she starts scraping violently at this notebook she's like doing or writing in, and the music kind of picks up and the sound keeps picking up, and you're just like, whoa, what's going on? And that's kind of your first cue, like something evil. Like
I think
evil
one of the
is
things
going
that
on.
works really well for me this movie, same reason as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is it is kind of a fever dream too. It's a different way,
Oh,
but
yeah.
like it's so loose and so loosely put together that it just feels off, like you're on uneven ground.
The
and it
girl
works
in
really well that way.
the cellar. If you've seen the remake, don't sell this one short. It's just as terrifying, even though it's dated 30 years earlier. The girl in the cellar. One character that also is one that sticks out as maybe the most terrifying parts for me is the girlfriend, who's not like zombied out as much, but she's like I think she's got that horrendous laugh, like that cackle.
Oh, yeah.
And also where they throw you off, whether like she turns back to normal and she's like, "Help me! Oh my God, what's going on?" And they like kind of like clip that on and off, whether she's being like her normal self or like this awful entity, and they really got me with that one, that laugh.
I feel like that's like the theme of the movie off and on. Like, one of the things that to me elevates Evil Dead so much is like how almost effortless it is for it to be so silly and nonsense, but at the same time be terrifying and disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, I thought the movie was genuinely really funny. Like, there was lots of scenes that were just really tongue-in-cheek, and there's lots of great one-liners. But at the same time, like, they're just transitioning right over to something just
I don't think
so
it's,
scary.
when you say genuinely funny, I don't think it's like genuinely funny as in like a comedy type way, but I think there's scenes
nervous laughter.
Yeah, there's nervous laughter, and there were scenes, especially towards the end when I was kind of winding down from the terror, where stuff would happen and I would like kind of clap and laugh to myself.
Yeah,
like, nice.
Yeah,
it's a really feel-good movie.
It is, actually.
In a weird way.
In a weird way.
But I was kind of saying that to Dylan's point. Dylan was saying that there's this kind of unease to the movie, and I feel like that's like I feel like the humor plays into that, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, this movie's kind of silly. Don't worry about it, and then they're just going to scare you. I mean, like,
you're on your back foot for the whole movie.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Me and Man talked about it. We talked about how we think they were just having fun with it.
Yeah, I think they were
Mhm.
trying to scare people, but I think that they also were like, oh, wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be awesome if we did this? And like, like, wouldn't it be hilarious if we just like hacked this dude into just pieces?
That is
and he's still jiggling around. Like,
that is what that movie is. It's just that wouldn't it be awesome if we did?
Right.
this?
And it just
did
seems like a bunch of friends that got together and made a movie. I'm actually really interested to know, Devin, like, you watched this for the first time this year, right?
Yeah, I'll admit that. Just like the TCM we have.
Yeah. So hey, I haven't seen The Shining all the way, so there we go.
All right.
But I'm interested to know, like, what did you think about this movie coming from, hearing so much about it, and like, do you think that influenced your opinion on the movie at all?
I think if it influenced it, and I think it did it in a very backwards way, in a good way, because like I said, I came in. Okay, let me set the scenario right here. I'm watching this movie by myself. My girlfriend's asleep on the couch. With headphones in. She's possessed, cackling. Normal stuff, though, which whatever. But we're.
Sorry, Lisa.
I love you, Lisa.
We love you.
She's not going to listen to this anyway.
She supports your dreams, buddy.
Not this far into it. No one is going to hear this far.
Nobody
anyway,
even knows this is
let me
going
go on.
anymore.
Scenario is it's at literally probably 3 in the morning at this point, that late, and it's on my projector. I have headphones in because my roommate's asleep and Lisa's asleep. And I'm watching it with headphones. I'm watching it at night. I'm watching it with rain and thunder outside on the projector. And the reason I do it, I'm not usually brave enough to watch like legitimately scary movies alone. Only reason I do it is because I had this misleading that it was gonna be a funny like horror comedy. Because people when they're like, "Oh, Evil Dead, yeah, I love that one. It's hilarious." Because they kind of lump them all together.
They think of Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, they think of Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness and stuff. And they lump them together like Evil Dead, yeah, hilarious. And I was like, all right, I can do this right now by myself in this scenario. And that's how it kind of, like, to answer your question, that's how it kind of had a good effect on me. Yeah, it caught me off guard. I was thinking it was going to be a funny, lighthearted movie. And like you guys said, it has a great setup to where it does kind of do that on purpose in the movie as well. Mm-hmm. So there's like 2 layers of this going on for me. I go in thinking it's a comedy, and then they set you up like it's going to be a lighthearted movie. And I'm watching it by myself, and then it just scared the shit out of me. Like, I was terrified. And, yeah, to answer your question, it worked great having this basically wrong perspective of this movie. I mean, let's make an example here. Like, you tell your friend you're going to watch a hilarious horror or hilarious comedy movie and tell them to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre at night. And it might be good for them.
Now, if you watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, that's absolutely
that's
true.
A different story. Yeah. That one is absurd.
That one is batshit.
Next Generation, though.
I still haven't seen it.
Oh, we should
with,
watch it. We need to watch that.
With
McConaughey. Matthew McConaughey. It's my kind of sense. We're just living
it. True Detective.
Anyway,
she would do a new one post True Detective.
Great choice, man. My number one is what I was referring to in the beginning when I said it was like in a hotel room. Young watching this, and I was just like, whoa, even though it was uncut. And it really does matter that this was uncut, because this is a gory movie, and that's the Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, which is my absolute favorite movie, period.
That's awesome.
But my God, this movie is good. It's I am the first to admit that it is not a perfect movie. by any stretch. But like the practical effects we were talking about,
Yeah.
unmatched.
I agree.
It is the top of
Yeah,
practical
cream of the
effects.
crop.
Agree with you on mine. We'll talk about that.
I think I know what yours is. But it's just so fucking good. It's the best because you know I like unease. I like movies that unsettle me, and this is a movie that relies on paranoia. Because to this
Exactly.
day, I have seen this movie more than anything else. I've seen it like 30 times, and I still don't know who is the thing.
This is a perfect
That's
example
so
of
brilliant.
that uncanny valley type thing where something just a tiny bit is off with something that you recognize as so normal that makes it that much more terrifying.
Exactly.
It is masterfully executed.
It's, I mean, it truly is. The concept, yeah.
Because
sorry,
like
go on.
if you've seen the 50s Howard Hawks version, which is a good movie in its own right, not scary at all, but you know it relies on like some old story that you know was about these people who are, this alien can kind of possess and mimic them, and it makes you so uneasy because you have no idea. The characters don't know, you don't know, and every time it gets revealed, it is an absolute shock.
Yeah, that's a great concept. Not knowing what is what. Basically.
And you know, like in high school when I was just writing scads of research papers because I was a huge nerd, I compare it to the Cold War. Obviously, not the first to do that, but
yeah,
it's a product of its time, but it's timeless. Oh god, I love the movie.
Just to bring this up, I mean, this is not necessarily on topic, but it's also interesting. This was brought up from a podcast I listened to. They're called the Horror Movie Podcast. Simple name. They're great, but they also bring up that it's an all-male cast, which is kind of
Yeah.
I never
interesting.
actually thought about that.
Yeah,
That's
Very-
one of the Dylan with like what you just brought up. That's kind of actually a downfall of my kind of almost objective to just watch things for what they are. Is that they are. If you step back and realize that they are in a time period, you can kind of
Yeah.
learn a little bit more about the movie. So I never actually thought about the kind of historic context of
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah, but the historical context is not beating you over the head or anything.
Oh, of
it's really
course not.
subtle.
Yeah.
I mean, it could even not be intentional,
Yeah, it's a product of its time.
but it just everything clicks with that movie. The opening scene just tells you something's completely off because you have no idea why they're chasing this dog in a helicopter.
Yeah.
And then once you figure it out, you're like, oh fuck, like
Am I
shit's gonna
less
hit
or
the
more
fan.
confused?
But the music too. I mean, to harp on Brewster's point there, like the music in the thing is brilliant. It's great.
John Carpenter, man, that dude has.
He didn't
made
do that. It's Ennio Morricone, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Boom.
No, not the music. The movie.
Yeah, no, the movie.
No, he's just made some absolute like masterpieces
And some absolute trash.
absolute stinkers. It's ridiculous. What is it about that era of
He tries
directors?
anything.
It's
That's
like
what I
Wes
like
Craven
about
that
him.
just
He will
does
try
the
anything.
Yeah.
Wes Craven makes these masterpieces, and then so many stinkers, and then comes back in '98, I guess, and makes another masterpiece.
Oh, sorry guys.
About New Nightmare.
Well, no, I'm talking about Scream,
Oh right.
Yeah.
Okay.
and then
That was
more
out of nowhere.
stinkers. Like, what
And more
is-
stickers. Scream 2 I kind of like.
Something about maybe it's just the genre itself is so hard to be consistent in. But yeah, that movie, The Thing, is so well put together and just solid all around. The concept is just so terrifying of not knowing what is real and what isn't, and again the whole uncanny valley aspect of like seeing a human but something being just off enough
Yeah.
to really like get that unease in there.
Nope, I completely agree. And like one of the things I want to point out is that we kind of started this podcast by just totally trashing on some infamous movies, but at the same time, like I feel like for a movie to be exceptional, at least in my eyes, it needs to withhold the same time. Like I don't need to look at it in a certain lens to appreciate it. Like
Yeah.
you look at The Thing, independent of what time period it came out, it's a fucking gem.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Evil Dead, same thing. You can have the worst perception of it going into it, and you're going to come out happy, right? I think Devin's a good example. Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah.
No matter, I probably could have watched another dozen terrible Texas Chainsaw mimics or remakes, and I would have loved the original just as much. So, like, The Thing, yeah, it's just...
Do not watch the remake.
Yeah.
It does
It's
everything
like a
wrong.
prequel, right?
I don't even want
Yeah,
to.
prequel. It does everything
Well,
wrong.
me and Dylan fell asleep watching it, right?
yeah,
Didn't
yeah. I fell asleep the first time.
Yeah.
Tried to go back and couldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tarnishes everything I love about the
It's
first
a
one.
shame that these remakes are so bad about, and especially the ones that are we harp on practical effects. The ones that are like known for their brilliant practical effects,
Yeah.
and they're
They did a
remade.
CG remake.
CG.
Why?
It's-
It's
Ugh.
so
Can't
do
pointless.
it.
I just don't understand. Like, if you can do something with practical effects, why
Do
wouldn't
it.
you?
So yeah, Hellraiser, the one that's coming out, apparently a remake. I'm so terrified about it.
Weren't they gonna have some of the same people involved though? Or
I
is
felt
that
like
wrong?
Clive.
They're gonna get Pinhead?
Sorry, oh man, no,
They're gonna
no,
raise
no.
him
booked
with the
him?
puzzle box.
Who's the
hope
director
so.
again?
I don't know.
Is it
I
Clive
can't
Barker?
remember.
No, is he writer? What is he? He's involved in there somehow. But anyway,
He is a writer, yes.
I remember that somebody who came out and spoke like aggressively against it, saying like, I don't want this to be remade, but I could be wrong. But yeah, they're gonna remake it, and they're gonna. I would imagine they're gonna use a lot of CGI to replace the amazing practical effects.
It's actually news to me. I didn't know that Hellraiser was even
I
being
didn't
talked about.
Pretty much, if there's a
You
movie
heard it here
that
first.
everything's gonna,
Yeah.
or it has plans for a
Creative
remake, yeah.
deficit in Hollywood.
I've already learned so much from this podcast. Can't wait to go check out all these films.
Well, speaking of films and you, Bluester,
Hey.
Last and certainly least.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Let's just round it out with a nice big stinky squeaker, and just really get the job done. So I just want to preface this by saying I'm actually surprised that no one has brought this movie up.
which movie you're
Yeah,
I
you can
don't.
see it. I'm surprised that no one has brought this up.
I am too.
No one has mentioned it, and I'm actually a little afraid that there's going to be an
Oh.
unpopular
Now,
opinion
you know
about
what?
this one.
I
I think I
didn't
know
think
where
about
you're
it.
going, and I think I realized it a few minutes ago, and I was like, shit, why didn't I add this to my
Yes.
list?
That's exactly what happened to my list. When you all said
Yeah.
Noroya, I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
I know.
Why
I know,
wasn't it
the,
on my
Oh,
list?
oh.
I know the one you're gonna say, and I wish it was on my list. I fucked up.
Okay,
It is.
so I'm prepared to defend this movie as being nearly perfect. Like every single time I watch it, it gets better. I watched it on Blu-ray. Holy shit, it can't possibly get better than that.
Oh, no, I'm wrong. Actually,
And
this is something else.
so, what did you think I was going to say?
I thought you were gonna say The Fly, the Cronenberg Fly.
I thought you were gonna say. Are you saying Ju-On? No.
I know what he's saying
I know.
now because I watched it.
I know.
I watched it with
So
him.
let's just go ahead and reveal the bad boy. It's Alien.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are going to think about that and they're going to be like, whatever. It's all right. Like, it probably is not the scariest movie you ever watch, but oh my God, it basically checks every box I could think up for a
Haunted
movie.
house movie in space.
Yeah.
basically-
slasher film in space,
Yeah.
basically.
Slasher, you have sci-fi, great soundtrack. I would say the best practical effects. The Thing is amazing, but like I'm still not convinced that the aliens in that movie weren't real, just like frozen corpses they pulled up just as effects in this movie, because the aliens were so disgusting and so
Yeah.
realistic that I have no idea how they replicated it. And they just put so much just painstaking detail into like alien mouths and just the maw and just the juices flowing everywhere. Like the movie is just so beautiful, and I think that it just transitions really well into this almost like slasher thriller, and you're in outer fucking space, and there's just this giant alien. I don't know, they managed to turn this giant creature into this like lumbering, almost like Michael Myers kind of character, and I think that Alien is so beautiful.
It's not objectively beautiful. It's actually kind of hideous. But
It's so slimy
H.R.
and
Geiger,
shiny, though.
please.
yeah, it also just looks like a penis. It's easy to dismiss that one as not being horror,
Yeah.
but my
I
God,
think it
it is.
absolutely
It is
is.
absolutely.
I think it's the perfect marriage of horror and sci-fi.
But it's totally the reason that I forgot to put it on my list.
The same
Yeah.
way-
It is kind of subtle in that way.
I was like, oh shit, yeah, that
I
is
would
a
say
horror
the
movie.
Thing is a horror sci-fi. I think
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
both
it
are.
is.
I'd agree with you.
It is.
And that's why I love both of them, and I thought about both of them heavily. It's just that Alien, like, there's so much subtlety, and there's so much, kind of like Matt was saying earlier, I don't remember the movie, but there's so much kind of background canon going on that you might not necessarily think about, and it's just kind of in this world, and I think that it's just so beautiful. And, God damn it.
How about that Prometheus?
Oh, that one was great. I think it was better than the original.
Something that I really like about Alien, like Brandon was just saying, it's got that great like they're in outer space, but it doesn't get played up. Like
Yeah.
it's like these are like blue collar workers,
It's just
they're
natural.
miners, and they're just doing their job, and they just happen to work in outer space. And I love that like used.
Basically.
Easy
it's
to
just
forget.
It's just a day in the
Yeah.
life. No,
Well, I love that used technology.
Exactly.
Yeah,
yeah.
And
That's
like the
dot matrix
the original
stuff.
Star Wars movies have that to a degree, but this movie especially, where it's like
Dirty.
it's just like this is
Lived in,
like
yeah.
what we would call like very
Exactly.
high end technology, but it's like this is old shit to them. You know, this is antique hardware.
It's
to
just a
them.
day in the life.
But that kind of gives it this even scarier feeling. You might think, oh, it's it's outer space. You know, they've been there for a while, not so bad. no, they haven't really.
On that note, what I think is so interesting about it is that it takes a premise of you're in space and makes you think, oh shit, this could happen to me.
Right, and that's
and
what's
literally no part of that movie can happen to
weird.
you.
Right, exactly.
But oh man, yeah, it's so lived in. You identify with the characters. They set them up well, and then kill them. It's great.
Yeah, on the point about the characters, I think that kind of to the lived-in nature of the technology they use, like the characters just feel really natural. They feel very at home. Like everything just feels very kind of organic. I don't know, and I love like the progression of everything, like the way you meet the characters, the way you learn about them, and then like kind of the introduction of all the different space elements and how like hard it is for them to be in space. I don't know. I love the hardships, and that actually kind of led to the horror. Like, damn man, they're in space. They could get killed by a damn space rock. It's petty shit, and I just love it.
I think one of my favorite things about Alien is like the unanswered questions. That movie tells you nothing.
Nothing. It reveals nothing.
But what's interesting about it is that, you know, I'm sure that they didn't go into it. I'm assuming they didn't go into it as like thinking they were going to make this, 30-year-long franchise. But you can tell that thought went into the universe.
Yeah.
But they don't spell it out for you, and they don't really answer your questions.
Which is why I was so mad at Prometheus.
Yeah. The questions are better unanswered, I think.
No, I agree, and I hate to like use your words, man, but like the world it's in is really pretty fleshed out considering what you're presented, and I think that it kind of adds credence to this whole story they're telling, and just makes it all the more eerie because you're wondering, like, what are all these things in the background? What's going on? Who are like what do I need to know about these characters that they're not telling me?
And it turns out those things in the background are aliens, and they want to kill you.
It's actually really funny the first time I ever saw it because I heard about Geiger much later in my life, and I'm like, what does he have to do with Alien? And if you actually rewatch it, the scenes with this great architecture, like really subtle. They don't really play it up at all. They're like, yeah, we've got some beautiful architecture, massive scapes. They're just there. It's part of the story. Don't even worry about it. And I think it's just so subtle in that way, and that's what I love about the movie the most. Also,
Ellen Ripley.
So good. That was one of the things we were watching the other day, and I was like holding back just my verbal creaming. Like I didn't want to like just gush over this movie.
You do have a way with words.
I'm pretty elegant when I need to be, but like I think the movie has a really strong female character without absolutely making you think like, oh yeah, man, she's a total macho badass.
Yeah, minus the TNA at the end, but yeah.
What was it at the end?
Where she's got panties or whatever.
Yeah, when that happened, we were just like, oh, there you go. Of course.
That was such like a fan service. Like, guys, this is a horror movie. There's going to be a nude girl. Like that's basically
that was
fulfill that prophecy. But like other than that, I think that it was just she was such a strong character.
It's a bit of a misstep that it's at the end after she's just been whooping ass.
It's almost like really inappropriate. But either way, that's my favorite, and I was a little surprised we didn't hear about it. But.
I was too, actually.
That movie's certainly made the top of many lists, but it's definitely the whole sci-fi genre that kind of
great movie
keeps it up. But it's an amazing and genuinely scary movie. I unfortunately haven't seen it since it was on VHS, so it's hard for me to recall many of it. But I do want to revisit that one this year.
Devin, we need to watch it on Blu-ray.
I would love to rewatch it on Blu-ray.
We should do it this week. Like, Blu-ray basically takes the things that are good about it, makes them better, and then like the inadequacies doesn't change them; it just makes them a little clearer.
Yeah, actually, that's funny because our friend Brennan, actually, he wanted the opposite. He insisted the opposite, where he only wanted to watch it on VHS.
I can see that.
It's
I
gritty.
can see that,
yeah.
but Alien actually looks amazing on Blu-ray.
And I'm more of I'll argue towards the Blu-ray side because it takes the graininess and the darkness that actually doesn't add to the movie and makes
think
it
can.
more. No, I'm saying it takes the parts that don't add to it. There are definitely parts that can, but I think they're smart when they redo movies. They take the stuff that's not adding to the movie and they enhance it.
Yeah.
So that'll be a good one to watch on a projector. And on Blu-ray quality because it'll still have that natural graininess and stuff.
Devin, I just want to say, like, I know Dylan had a point, but to the point of graininess and like Blu-ray, there's a lot of movies that suffer from like going up in higher resolutions because you see the breakdowns of like what they were capable of.
For sure, yeah.
But I don't think Alien, like, this is why I love that movie so much. I don't think it has those breakpoints. Like, you see all the effects in uber high res, and hot damn if it doesn't look good.
I believe it, for sure.
All the more to respect it.
God damn it.
All right, well, do you guys have anything else to add before we wrap things up?
I don't, because it's like 2:15 in the damn morning.
Yes,
I gotta
it
get up in
is.
4 hours.
Yeah, same here.
All right.
I just want to say this has been a bonding moment for me. I've seen
I
all of your all's
love it.
personalized lists, and it was just delicious to kind of get your all's insights.
Listen, I love it, and I love you guys.
For sure.
I love you guys.
You loved it? Was that on your
Yeah,
list?
no, I actually don't care
No,
for
but
that.
I don't think
No,
any
I
of
don't
us
think
care
of
for that
like
one.
it, yeah.
But anyway, to wrap things up, thank you guys. If we do have
Any listeners
to
still
be
left with
fortunate
us.
enough, I know.
If anybody actually listens to the follow-up
If there are any people who actually were listening in the first place,
We know we're long-winded, but
we love the genre.
we'll get better as we do this more. And just to give you an idea, if you're out there, that from here,
Is anybody out there?
From here, we'll be doing actual movie reviews. This was very much an introductory podcast to kind of get things out there, get the ball rolling.
I would dare say it was horrible.
It truly was horrible. But yes, from here on out, what we'll be doing mostly is just watching movies as a unit or separately, watching the same movies and reviewing them weekly, on a weekly basis. If we do it in October, we'll be doing 7 movies because that's one movie a day.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so please refer to us for your reviews. There will be non-spoilers, so you can decide whether you want to watch them or not. But again, thank you. We'll also pepper in some interesting interviews and just other weird topics like best, top 5 intros in a horror movie, top 5
Intros?
outros.
I like
Intro,
screams
not
and
Intro.
and intestines mostly.
But we'll find some fun topics to talk about. But yeah, we are the Horrorble. Is that right?
Horrible.
Yeah, sure.
Horrorble podcast.
Podcast.
We are all fans of horror, and we hope that we got. It's too late.
You did great, buddy.
I know, it's
You did
2
real
a.m.
good.
We hope
Almost
that
made it.
We
Oh,
hope
almost
that we
made
get
it.
some of you guys back to listen to us in the future.
Thanks, everybody.